We have a quorum, so I am calling the March 25th meeting of the Finance Committee for the Town of Concord to order. We are being recorded. We are being broadcast. I will begin with a roll call. I'm going to look at my screen. So Dean Banfield.
I am present.
Myself, Mary Hartman, present. John Hickling.
Present.
Ryan Taylor.
Hello, present.
Greg Gurriello.
Present.
Christine Reynolds.
Present.
Parachar Patel.
Present.
Phil Swain. Phil, you're on mute. I see you.
Present.
Wade Rubenstein.
Present.
Ray Andrews.
Present.
Kathy Kookolo.
Here.
Lois Wassoff.
Present.
Who am I missing? Dee Ortner.
Here.
And I think that's it. Great. Okay. First item on our agenda is minutes. Since we have no minutes, I can skip right over that. I'm going to the chair's report. First item on that list is the FinCom report. As you know, the Finance Committee is required by town bylaw to publish a Finance Committee report no later than 10 days before town meeting. The purpose of that report is to inform the town where we stand financially and make recommendations on any warrant articles that are pending in front of town meeting. This year, Lois and I are meeting with Carrie to simplify and reorganize the FinCom report because it's kind of grown over the years, and as happens often, it's kind of grown a little bit, let's say furry. It's a little furry. So we want to kind of streamline it and reorganize it. So we're in the midst of doing that. I've got two things I need to tell you. In the past, every FinCom member who has an observer assignment has been asked to write some summary of what's happening with their committee. We're not going to do that this year. I'm only asking you, those of you whose committees have warrant articles that are coming up in front of town meeting, I would like you to write a summary of our recommendation. Okay, so some of you are off the hook as far as writing summaries of what's happening with your committees. The other change is we're simplifying the 5-year tax projections. So Greg, I'd be interested to know if you have it, you signed up to help us with that this year. And do you have any ideas about how you'd like to streamline that?
So I'll say I signed up to help with Dean. And
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, Dean, I don't mean to throw that out there. I am actually still trying to parse through the spreadsheet. It is a very, Dean did put it well, it's a very intricate spreadsheet. So I think Dean and I have to meet a little bit more to start off actually meeting and put something down.
I would get together with Carrie really quickly so that you can, I think you're absolutely right. That spreadsheet is very hard to deal with. It's very complicated. And I think it can be simplified, if not like restarted. You might want to reboot the whole thing. So Carrie and Lois and I spoke about that today. So if you want to talk with her, that would be great. Okay.
Just a comment on that, if I could.
Yeah.
It's hard to get that model really going until we have the budget book or something. You know, we have to have hard numbers because the thing takes hard numbers. Now we may want to revise it and just get a piece of graph paper and draw some lines. We get to do it really simple, but if we're doing any kind of modeling, we do work that off the formal school budget that they produce and the budget book. So that those things are critical resources for creating columns for this year's proposed budget. So if we don't want to use this model at all, that takes the highly detailed approach to trying to solve it, then we can kind of start right in with something else, some other idea.
Okay, I guess I'm suggesting that you and Greg and Carrie work together to start thinking about that so that we don't end up at the last minute. I'm really trying to get a head start on this year. so that we're not working at the last minute and hurrying to put something together. We need to get this to the printer by the end of May. So we're shooting for like a May 21st day, and believe it or not, that's going to come up fast. So if you just work with them, I'd appreciate that. Work with Carrie, okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. The next item on our agenda on the chair's report is the nominating subcommittee. Nominating subcommittee is where we nominate the chair and the officers for next year's finance committee. And believe it or not, it's not too soon to start thinking about that. In the past, what we've done is we've had the former chairs and the current chairs have a conversation and put together a slate of people, bring that back to the full committee and have the full committee approve it. This year, because the only chairs and former chairs we have are Dean and myself, I'd be open to some senior FinCom members joining us for that conversation and helping us put together that slate of candidates to bring forward to the full committee. And I'm particularly interested in people who might be rolling off this year. So I'm looking at you, Dick. And also I'm looking at Phil Swain.
Yes.
You're both veterans. You've been through many cycles. I think you know what the job entails. And I'm wondering if we could enroll you for, I think it's one conversation.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm happy
yeah.
to do it. I've done it. I've done it several times, so no problem.
Great. Dick?
Yeah, that's fine.
Great, thank you. So I'll have Carrie set up that. Thank you. Okay, last thing on the chair's report is the calendar. I've got two things I would like to tell you here. One is that May is going to be a very busy month because we have all the hearings in the month of May. We have one hearing at the end of April, no scheduled regular FinCom meeting in April, but we do have several hearings in May. And as you know, the hearings are becoming more and more important because a lot of the discussion around articles takes place at the hearings because town meeting is held outside. So in May, we've got many hearings. The other thing I wanted to mention to you is on May 13th, we have a regular FinCom meeting. And apparently there's a conflict between that and the public hearing for the planning board articles. So I'm asking if instead of having that regular meeting on May 13th, we just agree that after each public hearing, we will reconvene for our own meeting and make any recommendations on warrant articles that were presented that night. So it might be long nights, but we won't have to come together on May 13th. Okay? Anybody have any objections to that?
No objection from here.
Great. Okay, so we're canceling May 13th. We'll long meetings after the, we'll reconvene and have meetings after the hearings. Okay, great. Good. That's all I've got. Let's move right into the next thing is the a review of the FY22 through 26 capital improvement plan. And I believe Kate is going to present to us. Is that right, Kate?
Yes, I
Okay.
am. If I can share the screen. Is everyone able to see this?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So good evening. I'm Kate Hodges. I'm the Deputy Town Manager. So there have been several iterations of this presentation that while we've worked to identify projects that we can financially and realistically in terms of time and finance complete this year. And so this is what we hope to be our final iteration. The FY22 capital requests come from two sources, as you know, outlay or cash capital and debt. And we're recommending an appropriation of $800,000 in outlay and $6 million in new debt. As you can see, the total amount or value of the projects that we intend to do in fiscal year 22 is $9,615,000. However, many of the projects that are intended for this coming year are either funded through other means, such as prior year's capital debt authorizations or CPC or grants. So of the $6 million in the new debt, $5.1 million will be used for municipal projects and $900,000 will be allocated to the school's capital. The school's budget presentations will outline their specific projects. And so for tonight's presentation and discussion, I'm really only
Kate,
focusing.
can I interrupt you for 1 second? Can you
Sure.
go back to that slide?
Yes.
Dean, you're muted. Dean, you're muted.
I'm sorry. You described the debt authorizations here as 9.6 million because of prior debt authorizations, but then you also said CPC funds and grants. Are those included in this 9.6 or is this actually debt? That's my question.
I'm sorry. Yes, the title is misleading. They are not all new debt, and it's not all debt. I have a slide that will actually break it out for you and tell you how much is old debt, new debt, CPC, grants, or other.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Is it, say, Mary, it's Stephen, can we, I suggest maybe let's just get to the slides and then maybe go for Q&A and we can go back as much as people want. Does that be okay?
Let's see if we have a lot of questions or not. We'll get through it. Go ahead.
Okay, so this table outlines the various places and needs within the capital outlay. So again, this is an $800,000 total. So $450,000 of this amount is allocated to general government for IT, ADA improvements within town buildings, $100,000 to be used towards the fleet electrification efforts. $220,000 will be used for various public safety needs as seen here. $105,000 will go towards roadworks, sustainable infrastructure, public shade trees, and street signage within CPW's operation.
Kate, this is Brasher. Just in the future, it would be very helpful to have a total at the bottom, because I'm kind of curious of, we're doing 800,000 now, but what is the total for 5-year total from fiscal year 22 to 26, for example, just to get a sense of proportion. So if you can in the future to put totals at the bottom, that would be helpful.
Absolutely. Yep.
It's 800 for FY21, right?
Yes, it is.
FY22. It's 800,000, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
So again, this says debt plan, but it just means the non-capital outlay projects are going to equal a little over 9.5 million. New debt is 6 million, 795,000 in CPA funds, almost 1.3 in prior debt, about 800,000 in prior cash authorization. So those are encumbrances that we have, 125,000 in grants, and then 605 in others. This is the debt authorization plan and what I was talking about a few slides ago. So the new debt here, I tried to make the fields in this table as large as I could. And while the numbers are visible, I understand that the project language on the left is not. So you can bear with me here, but the projects which will constitute the entirety of the new debt in this column here include the renovation of town buildings, which is a reoccurring line item of varying amounts from year to year, but usually hovers in the 200,000 range. 500,000 will be allocated towards improvements at White Pond. 325,000 will be used towards the Ralph Waldo Emerson House acquisition. 1.25 million will go to the Warner's Pond dredging project. And for the record, this is the final amount needed for that project to actually start for this year. 500,000 will go to the fire department for ladder refurbishment and the self-contained breathing apparatuses. 1.75 million will be used for road and parking lot reconstruction and also towards drainage, culvert repair, and sidewalks. And the remaining 480,000 will be used to replace 2 pieces of large public works equipment. So there are additional project-specific slides. And I'm not clear or what the finance committee's preference would be, whether you want to just wait and see if anybody has a specific question and I can just fast forward to that slide, or if you want me to go through all of those slides. And also there are some tables that outline funding for the larger multi-year projects that are not really in public safety or CPW. And we have slides for that too. They were shown at the select board meeting, and they were also in your packet. So I'm assuming that you're looking through them. So in the interest of just not wasting anybody's time, if you want to stop here and do questions, that's fine.
Actually, Kate, they weren't in our packet, so this is the first time we've seen them.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
So I would be interested in seeing the multi-year project, the total cost for the multi-year, multi-million-dollar projects that you've got.
Absolutely. Let me just fast forward.
While you do that, Kate, can you answer just if it's a simple question? The prior debt authorizations, do they have to be reauthorized every year?
I'm gonna have Kerry answer that just so I can make sure. My understanding is that only if we're gonna reallocate them to something else.
So that is correct. We have a history of authorizing lump sum amounts, particularly for building projects. And sometimes those are very specific and sometimes they're very general. We have one prior authorization for 141 Kais Road, which is very specific. And the amount is far in excess of the project that is going to be done. So in that case, we need to go back to town meeting and ask town meeting to transfer that authorization from one project to another project. But if we were to expend that money on projects that are related to the original intent, whether or not they were specifically for that intent, we wouldn't necessarily have to get additional authorization.
And Carrie, you only draw down, you only actually borrow when you're about to spend, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So this is in the specific project funding ones, and there's 3. So whenever you're ready to have me move on to the next one, I can. If you want to talk about these specifically, we certainly can. Is it helpful if I just go through the 3 slides? And
No, actually, if you want, I have a question here about White Pond.
Sure.
Okay, so White Pond, you're showing that this year you're hoping to get 500 through the municipal capital plan article and another 300,000 through CPC. And overall, you're looking at the project costing 1.7 million. And that doesn't include, I think it was 200,000 you had for the slope restoration way back when. Was it?
That is correct. That's so that's at Sachem's Cove, which is the opposite end, but yes. Yep.
Okay.
You're
Okay.
correct.
Actually, I'm glad to see that this number is a lot lower. This is closer to the number that we heard when we accepted the gift of White Pond. So I'm happy about that. But I do have a question, and this is a philosophical question. We're borrowing money for which the debt service is going to be paid by the general fund, and yet the use of that pond is restricted to members, right? Can you give me an example of something else within town that parallels that?
So the use of that pond is not restricted to members, and really hasn't been. We do have a fee that we charge, and honestly, that really is up for debate with the town whether they want to do that or not. But the fee that we charge pays for the anywhere between 8 to 12 weeks, depending on how long we can run, for lifeguard services and other things relative to the beach. But as a great pond in Massachusetts, we have to keep that parcel open and available to anybody who wants to either have a boat launch area, use of the boat launch area, or fish or do anything from the shoreline. And because it is now a town park, which I realize is a bit of a hot button issue, it isn't a park like you would say Emerson or Rideout Field is, but it is going to be open and available for people to use without having to purchase anything throughout the year. And so that is a bit of a nuance there. We don't have.
Could I swim, Kate? Could I go and swim there without paying some kind of a membership?
It depends on when you swim and where you enter the water from. So you're able to enter the water in a great pond from multiple areas, with the exception of Sachem's Cove, because the select board had a restriction on being able to enter the water from there. But
But if I
you know,
wanted to swim in the general area that where they
if you want to
put
swim
down
in
a
July,
deposit,
you would need to, yes, you'd need to purchase,
a membership.
yeah, as it is right now. That doesn't have to be the case. That was something that we had kind of talked about as a pilot program. If for whatever reason the town decides that they just want to have it to be an open and available park where people can just come in, that would be fine too. I think what you will see is a corresponding uptick in general fund appropriation for lifeguards and other, seasonal safety.
I maybe that's the way we want to go, because I find it kind of inconsistent that the general fund is paying for the repairs that needed to be done and the ADA compliance that needed to be done to make it available to people, and yet the general public really can't use the swimming area. So I don't think we do that in any other. There are no other facilities within town that I can think of where that was true. I mean, like the Beatty Center, it's more like an enterprise fund where the users' fees cover the costs and other. So it just.
Hey, Mary, what about
Yeah.
the Emerson Playground pool?
Yeah.
What about that?
Yeah, that's a good. Does the general fund pay for that? Do you have to be a member?
So yes, you used to have to be a member, and there was a membership, but last year, because of COVID, we actually didn't have that. The year before, we asked people for a nominal fee, but this year, what we're doing is a study, which is also captured here in the capital plan. That pool is failing. And so what we're looking to do is propose to the community a number of different initiatives. And one could be that it's just a large public swimming facility, pool, splash pad or something. And our hope is that we wouldn't be charging. It would just be open and available.
Okay.
But again, that's a multi-year. We'll bring it back, and we want to kind of understand what the community wants to see there. You're absolutely right, though, Mary, that this is a very unique situation. The only one thing I can say is that when we were talking about it at the special town meeting, we recognized that some of the catalysts that the gift kind of came upon, and why White Pond Associates was looking to the town, was that it was very expensive to be able to bring this into compliance, both with the ADA and also with the Architectural Access Board. And so I think that we sort of knew that we were going to have to do something, and the numbers have fluctuated because frankly, pricing has been a bit all over the place. And so what we've done is we've systematically taken out all of the things that we would consider fluff, and tried to just put in stormwater management and what we need to do as a bare minimum for the ADA and Architectural Access Board. And I agree with you that that is borne on the back of taxpayers who may or may not use the property.
Right.
So
Okay.
I think it's a good question, and it's a good conversation to have.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question, just to clarify it in my mind. I also, like Mary, thought that if you paid a fee, you could swim at White Pond, not only the residents of Concord, but people who were not residents. And apparently that's changed from what I initially understood to you need a membership. And the other question is, if you're using the boat ramp to launch, do you just drive in and use it?
Yes. Yeah. So if you're using the boat ramp to launch, you just drive in and use it. If the parking spots that are there that are designated by the state are full, we certainly allow people to park up in the upper parking lot. There's not a problem there. You have to pay for the ability to swim there during the weeks that the beach is open to the public, because we have that being a self-sustaining operation for everything other than capital, which is also something that we talked about at the special town meeting when we accepted it. So anything that we generate as far as revenue that's coming in is supposed to pay for trash pickup, lifeguards, those type of things, any type of capital improvement, including, sand that we get, or any type of buoy system or docks, those are going to be borne from the town.
So to just to be absolutely clear, if during the summer, I wanted to bring a kayak or a canoe and launch it, I would have to pay a fee.
No, nope, not for
No.
the boat launch. At no time during the year. That is absolutely
Okay.
free, and it isn't just for residents, it's for anyone.
Okay. Got it.
So
Thank
can
you.
I just ask, this might be getting a little off track, but I just wanted to ask the question just to sort of honor the sustainability goals we have as a town and, what we're trying to do there. If someone is boat launching into this pond, there's obviously going to be an exhaust that takes place. We don't charge anything. We don't charge a tax. We don't charge, you're charging people to swim, but we're not charging people to, use their recreational vehicles. So I'm just trying to understand, that's a little bit of a mismatch. Can you expand on that a little bit, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So we don't allow, it's all non-motorized. No one is
Okay.
allowed to have a motorized boat or any other type of watercraft, with the exception of the fire department, who is able to use it for rescue purposes or training only. And it's also owned by the state. And so we actually, it's a bit of a nuance, but if you were to look at the town's GIS, you can see that there's a bit of a sliver there, and it'll tell that it belongs, that in the roadway belongs to the state. And so they are actually the custodians of that small piece. We have a usage agreement whereby we can make any improvements that we want to it, and they don't have to be contractually bound to help us with that, but we aren't allowed to charge any fees for parking or usage.
Okay, thank you.
Would you like me to go to the next one,
Sure, please.
Mary? Sure.
Yeah, please.
Kate, can you expand on the ride out playground?
Yes, so that actually, we should probably pull up prior years. What we did was we put in prior years that were mostly 17 and 18. And the Anderson property that was right next to the ride out park, I believe was purchased in 2014. And you'll forgive me if I'm a little off, that predates my time here. But my understanding is that it was purchased for the purposes of folding that basically into the park envelope. And the main reason for that was that the parking that was sort of immediately adjacent to Losbrook Road was quite dangerous and really didn't have enough to be able to sustain the usage, particularly during a baseball season. And so over the course of several years, 14, 15, 16, there was a number of capital monies that were put in. And in 2017, we started in earnest, and that I was here during that part, to create the new parking area that you see there, a stormwater retention basin that is right alongside Losbrook Road, and then to basically create walking paths and some plantings in what used to be there. The 200,000 that you see in fiscal year 20 was money that we used to connect the walking path that goes all the way around the entire property. So if you were to enter from Losbrook Road, it goes all the way over to Conan Street and kind of connects back. And it also was used for what we were calling the American Ninja Warrior gym, or the fitness equipment that was down at the bottom back of the area that's right next to where the Conan Street lot is. And so that's the money from there. Recreation's revolving account also contributed $235,000 for that exercise equipment, and to be able to reseed and reloan the soccer field that is right on the outside of that.
And the 195,000?
That is that's a project that was actually proposed last fiscal year, and we deferred it, and we're deferring it again, and it's for the restrooms that are there. They are right next to where the parking lot is now, between the tennis courts and the basketball courts. And
Right.
they are woefully undersized. They are not sustainable. We're looking for low flush toilets, automatic faucets, and those were all built in the 1970s. And so they need to be replaced, but it's not so immediate that we couldn't defer it for another year.
So should that come out of that column? It's not in FY '22?
Carrie, did we end up, I'm sorry, Carrie, if you're, I can't quite see everybody. I know she's here, but did we end up cutting that and saying, I think we have it depicted here because if somehow our financial situation improves, that would be the first thing that we cut that we would add back. And so we wanted to be able to represent it here just as a matter of letting people know. But you can correct me if I'm wrong, Carrie.
It was removed. As Kate said, it was really the last project that we had under consideration but didn't have funding for, and we should have updated this, but we have not yet.
So it should come off of this sheet.
Well, it
Okay.
should go probably into fiscal 23.
23.
Great, okay.
I'll move it over. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Any other questions on this one?
Yeah, so Kate, can we talk about Giroux? So I just want to refresh my memory. So the 5 million included the acquisition cost, is that right?
5 million. Yes,
Yeah.
it did. Yep.
So how much, so the amounts, I know there was a discussion of a facility that was going to be kind of along the water and, you had some architectural drawings. Is that what's included in the amounts that are going forward here? Excuse me.
Right, so we purchased it for 2.7, 500,000 of that was from CPC. We had 300,000 that we used to do feasibility analysis, a master plan, and then all of the due diligence that we needed to purchase it. So what's called a phase 1, so an environmental study, wetlands flagging, etc. And so what we have now is a pretty, I think, robust park plan where we have the driveway that is going to be coming in over the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, coming in from where the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail parking lot is right now along Commonwealth Ave, comes in. There's about 27 spots that are there. At the end of that area, there is a small gathering spot with a small building. It's about the size of a 2-car garage. And that will have a restroom facility, 1 male, 1 female, and a small electrical area and custodial spot with a little bit underneath to be able to get some maintenance equipment under that. And immediately next to that will be a timber frame pavilion, open air timber frame pavilion. Other than that, the 1.2 includes some ADA walking paths, some non-ADA walking paths around that. Clearing, grubbing, removal of some serious invasives. We have a lot of honeysuckle there. And then the stormwater management. So of course we're adding impervious surface to an otherwise, area that didn't have any of that. And so we have stormwater management that will be immediately along the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, surrounding where the bathroom building is. And then also a couple of rain gardens and detention ponds that are between where the bathroom building is and the walkways are.
Thank you.
Okay, next. I
Yep.
think you got one more, right, Kate?
Yes. Yep.
Good. And can you explain to me what the 250 is in FY '22 for the bridge over the Aspet River? What is that is included in that 5.1 million number that you gave us earlier, right?
The FY, yes, that is for the initial design and permitting, and there will be some money that is going to be saved from natural resources in order to start construction.
I thought I'm interested in this project because it's in my neighborhood, but I thought we were getting help from some of the businesses in that area to help us fund it, and yet I'm not seeing that reflected in these numbers.
My understanding is that we haven't received anything as of yet, and
Yeah.
It's unclear to me whether it's because that campaign hasn't really started in earnest or whether we don't want to rely on money that we don't necessarily have the cash in hand for. But I think Marcia Rasmussen would probably be better, and I
Yeah.
can certainly reach out to her and ask her for an update on that.
Yeah, I think when I spoke with Marcia, it was, we can't go to the businesses until we have a design. So we're going to get the design for the 250 and the placeholder for the 2.5 later on. It's under other, and I think we're hoping to get that through the businesses in the area that have all the employees walking on the railroad tracks.
You sure? Yeah. No,
So-
that sounds
Yeah.
very familiar, and
Yeah.
I'm sure that's what it is.
Great.
And as you all
That's good.
know, FY 23 to 26 is sort of a moving target depending on what's going on and frankly what breaks during the year. So I think probably at this time next year, you'll likely see a different number there.
Great. Okay, good. No, this is good. I'm glad to see the 2.5 in the other line. Any
Kate?
other questions? Go ahead, Phil.
Is this a new bridge or is it a replacement of an existing bridge?
It's new. Yeah. This is
And
new.
where is it?
It's basically connecting sort of the downtown area to the Baker Ave extension area. I
Great.
can stop share if there's no other questions and nobody has any project specific questions.
No, I don't think we have any
Great.
questions.
Great.
Anybody have any questions? Are we all good?
My question, I have a couple questions, Mary. They're not specific to the charts that Kate was showing. So,
Go ahead.
so back in the beginning there was it showed sort of what people requested. And then in the technology spend, I thought it was like 1.8 million. Am I wrong on that?
No, you're right.
Are you asking what the request was? Or
Well, I was trying to figure out, it looked like that compared to the others, that one was a lot, what we were actually spending was a lot lower than what was requested. So I was just trying to understand.
You're right.
I was trying to understand that one. I don't know if that's you or Stephen, but that one was of interest to me.
I think you're right. I think the request was like close to 1.8.
it
And
was.
the recommended was something like 200,000.
200,000, right? So what happened there? That's a pretty good haircut.
Chris, would you mind repeating your question? My audio froze up and I probably have the answer, but I didn't hear the full question.
Okay. On one of the charts that Kate showed earlier, they had a column that was, here are the requested amounts from the town. And around technology, the request was, I think, close to 1.8 million. The actual being funded, I think, was lower, maybe it was a couple 100,000. So I was just trying to understand the delta.
So the 1.8 million had to be the cumulative 5-year total because the
Oh, okay.
individual year requests were about 400,000 a piece. And in fiscal 22, we did cut that back to 200,000 because we do believe we have some opportunity to use some of the federal stimulus money for technology. We have some existing encumbrances. And so, and the IT director is new and
Right.
that seemed like a fair amount to fund in the first year.
Okay. Yeah, so I watched his presentation on cyber to the select board and looks like he has a lot of good ideas and I suspect, he's doing things that needed to be done and I don't know, I think he's going to be probably an area that's going to be looking for more budget and not less. It would seem to me, over the next couple of years, he's probably going to come back with things that he's going to need. So that's why it drew my attention. So is he happy with what he's got? He can work with it?
Well, I don't, oh, Stephen, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things on that, Chris. Is he happy with what he's got? I mean, is any department head ever truly happy with what they got? Most of the ones that work here.
Secretly, is he secretly happy, Stephen?
would do more if they had more.
Right.
So I think, it's such a big transition right now. The move to a cloud, I mean, Microsoft Outlook is, we live on it. And moving to Office 365, which is cloud-based, is a major shift for us. And then there's other areas that we are shifting as well. And so I think in some ways, because we are looking at some significant IT operations to move to a cloud-based, it actually will reduce the number of capital expenditures in terms of server replacements and things like that. It is hitting the operating budget a little harder because there are annual licensing fees and things like that we have to pay now. But I think, we're in a good spot. Like I said, we are in kind of a transition phase, and he has brought a lot of new ideas and a new approach that I think will serve the community broadly, but also the town operations specifically very well. And like I said, I think we will be more looking at operating increases because of licensing versus capital replacements.
No, that makes sense. Okay, great. Thank you.
Mary, we're starting to get a Q&A in if you want to do, whenever you want to do public comment.
I'm going to hold that to the end. Thank you, Chris.
So if you don't have any more questions, I won't take up any more of your time.
Thank you, Kate.
Sure. Thank you very much, everyone.
The next thing on our agenda is the free cash certification. Carrie, I think you're going to get us up to date on that. We actually got our free cash certified.
Sure. If you don't mind, I just have one slide that I think might be helpful.
That's very good.
Let's see if I have permission to share. Oh. Okay, here we go. All right. So hopefully, is this reasonably readable?
Bigger would be better.
All right, let's see if I can. Does that work?
Works for me. What about other people? You good? Okay.
Yes.
Better.
Okay, so on the right-hand side of the slide is last year's free cash certification. So for the new members, we have our free cash certified by the State Department of Revenue on June 30 of each year. And it is the amount of reserves that is available for appropriation if the town so chooses as of July 1st of that year. So last year we had over $11.8 million worth of free cash, and that represented 10.24% of the budget for fiscal year 20. We had a number of spending articles that totaled $4.4 million, and that reduced our free cash to about $7.4 million, or about 6.42%. So then we just had our free cash certified as of 30/2020, which it probably seems like a long time ago that we should have had it certified, but we can't have our free cash certified until our audit is complete and has been submitted, and until we file multiple forms with the state. So the free cash certification as of June 30, 2020 is less than what we had expected. It's just under $6.4 million, representing 5.5% of the fiscal 21 budget. There were a couple of things that happened that really artificially reduced our free cash on a temporary basis. And if you look on the left-hand side at the bottom, there's a blue line. It says amounts reserved due to timing. So we had a total of $1.46 million reserved or withheld from our free cash certification because of timing issues. 1.34 million of that was related to the Cambridge Turnpike project and Chapter 90. The town received a rather large grant from Mass DOT for the Cambridge Turnpike project, and Chapter 90 is the money that we receive on an annual basis from the state for road repairs. And so because of time issues, we did not receive the grant reimbursements in time for them to be counted towards the June 30, 20 certification. The amounts have been received. So when we have our free cash certified as of June 30, 2021, these amounts will be included. There was also another small amount for some borrowing in the telecommunications fund, about just under $120,000. So borrowing or spending against a borrowing article after we had done the annual bond issue, and it was not necessarily anticipated to be done during that time period, but because of we had a transition of staff and not a complete understanding of when spending against a borrowing article needed to take place. So that will also be returned or become part of next year's free cash certification. So the important things to know is that our free cash to start with is 5.5% of budget. So it is within our policy guideline of having 5 to 10% free cash. It is very typical that a AAA rated community has at least 5% in free cash. It would be atypical for a AAA rated community to have something less than that. We do have a planned spending of $1 million from free cash in the fiscal 22 budget proposal. So that would reduce our free cash if that were to be approved by town meeting to just under 5.4 million, which would be 4.67%. So it would be under the 5%. However, when you factor in these other amounts that will come back into play next year, we would still be well within that 5 to 10%.
And Carrie, just to refresh my memory, the monies that were essentially receivable regarding the turnpike, those have been paid. Is that correct?
They have been received by the town.
Right. So that's money that's in hand. It's not like we're betting that we're going to get this money. We have it.
That's correct. The requirement is on grant funds that you have them received by September 30th. And these literally came in the first week in October.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Well, when you talk to our bond raters, I don't know when the next time you have a conversation with them, will the fact that that money is in hand, even though it wasn't certified, will they take that into account when they issue a bond rating?
Yes, I believe they will. And we will have our bond rating review within about a month or about 5 weeks. But I'm not concerned at this point in time that they're going to look at this and say, you know what, you're at 4.67%, you're below 5%. You know, we're going to put a negative outlook on your credit rating. That's not going to happen.
Terry?
I guess I would also say this is really not the same issue. I know there's some concern about the CCRSD had their bond rating downgraded. This really is not the same thing. CCRSD does not have its own taxing authority, and it is capped at a maximum of 5%. So they're really, even though they sound similar, they're not really the same issues.
A question, Carrie. So I know for affordable housing that back in 2019, there was a warrant item that up $500,000 would be allocated for affordable housing based on a free cash ceiling of 5%. Is that have to be certified free cash, or can that be? I mean,
Great question.
How does that work?
So the only free cash that can be spent by town meeting is certified free cash. So
So we're at risk for 2023 potentially in terms of the affordable housing.
well, we do not yet have any town meeting appropriation for affordable housing plugged into fiscal 22.
22.
Right, so the issue will come up at this town meeting.
So can I ask, let me try asking this a different way. If the town were to put together a warrant article this year for another $500,000 for the affordable housing, right? What would that do to that 4.67%
Well, it's going to,
go down?
right, it's going to reduce it. So we would be at just under $4.9 million.
That
I'm
one's
sorry.
after,
Um,
yep.
Would it reduce a 5.3, or would it ultimately reduce a 6.8 million down at the bottom?
Well, so everything below the amounts reserved due to timing, that's just for illustration purposes. What is above that is the certified numbers, and that's what we need to focus on, but I wanted to put that into perspective. So I'll leave it at that and see if there are questions.
Carrie, is the same to reduce the property taxes? Is that also under the same of what Wade suggested, right? Because our certified is above the 5.5%, right? So is the million that we take to reduce property taxes also subject to the 5% that Wade mentioned?
I would say yes, because the policy minimum of 5%, and it talks about expenditures, suggested types of expenditures when you're above 5%. When we put the initial budget together back in November, and we were not expecting the state to reserve these amounts. And so our working assumption was that we would be closer to $8 million in free cash.
But remember, that million that we're showing here was baked into the guideline number. So if we've got to leave this in free cash,
Right.
changes the guideline.
Mhm.
I
What do you
guess
mean by leave it? Sorry, leave it.
If you
in-
don't,
Not move the
if we
article.
not remove it.
So right now, the plan is to use this $1 million of free cash to offset increased spending next year. Right, so we're going to increase spending next year. $1 million of that's going to be covered by this, and the rest was the guideline. The guideline fell out of that, and it said, okay, so town and schools, you can increase your spending by this much because we're going to cover $1 million of it with free cash.
But do we need to revisit that because of this?
Good question. I think my way of thinking of it is that if Kerry thinks that the bond rating agencies will take the 1.461 million that the state has given us that isn't certified, if they're going to consider that when they figure out our rating, which I think she said, then to me, that's, even though it's not certified, it meets our goal of keeping a balance to maintain our AAA bond rating. So the way I think of it is that, yes, that's the certified amount, but then we have another 1.461 that we can use for either the 1 million that we typically do to offset guideline spending, and another 500,000 for affordable housing if the numbers work.
So I had two questions. One is the 2020 annual town meeting request line on the left-hand side. Shouldn't that read 2021? I'm a little confused there. Should it read 2021?
Oh, it should.
Okay, thank you.
Inside,
Here's the
yeah.
other question I had. I agree, Mary, what you're saying. I get the logic, but
Yep.
I'm going to use these words, all other things being equal. It places additional pressure or risk that when we go into 2021 annual town meeting, we're going to be right at the cusp because that 1.4 million would otherwise be counted for certified free cash next year. Is that right?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay.
you're right.
So, and then one other question, just because I'm a simpleton here. If I look at this, it appears that the message over the next 2 to 3, or message, it appears that from fiscal year 2019 to fiscal year 2021, we're dipping into our reserves in essence, right? Because they've gone down from 11.8 million down to 6.4 million. And we're saying if we do what we want, it would be down to 5.4 million.
Yeah.
Is that a fair high-level summary?
I think two things are happening, Parashar. One, what you said, which is we are using free cash. And two, we have not been generating free cash, which we typically do.
Yes.
So we have scooped surplus to fund budget versus allowing it to accrue to excess. And
Or
we've
to
done that
reduce
for
spending.
2 years. And that's the other thing that's happening.
That's right.
Or to reduce spending or change service levels.
Correct. That's
Okay.
right. So we took the surplus, the amounts that weren't spent in 2019 and 2020 have been used to fund the next year. And
Well,
instead of keeping it, yeah.
Well, they're not funding the next year, right? Because we have.
No, they
Article 20
were. So we
Well,
didn't add them to
2009 the 2019, right? Article 29, we put for the middle school stabilization fund of 2 million. That's not
that was
funding.
existing free cash. What I mean, Greg, is it's free cash is built from a surplus, right? So revenue minus expenses. So we had surplus, and that was used to fund we used it for the budget. We didn't
Oh, all
add
right,
it
I
to
see.
free cash.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah,
And we've
I
done
see what
that
you're
now
saying.
for 2 years.
Right, but
So
we
free
also
cash is not
dug
growing
in.
at all.
We
I'm
also
sorry.
dug in pretty hard with the 2 million to the
Yes,
to
we
the
did,
stabilization.
right.
That's
Yes.
a big.
Well, the
That's a
positive on
big
those-
chunk of it.
Yeah,
Yes,
the
it is.
positive on those 2 million is that it's set aside, it's still a
Right.
balance, but it's encumbered, that's all.
Right.
It
Right.
can't be counted
Right.
against this.
It
particular
can't be used,
account.
but it can go back, right? If town, right? It correct me if I'm wrong. It could go back to free cash if we somehow went way below the 5%, right? I'm asking the question. I'm not
It's
saying.
not obvious.
Yeah,
It could, town meeting could vote it back.
Right. That's what I remember Carrie saying that.
I think it's important to also point out that even though it is early to be making fiscal 21 year-end projections, it wouldn't surprise me if we had some add to free cash after we take into account the full of fiscal 21 operations. And I say that because our revenue estimates really were very low for local receipts. They were down 20 to 25% in certain cases. And local receipts they're definitely holding their own. And I do think we will exceed our very low estimates, which will result in some add to free cash. Even with the planned use, like we did under Article 10, we have a similar article or a similar use for the fiscal 22 budget, but that is going to come from under expending the budget, and the revenues over estimates will go back to free cash.
Hey, Mary, it's Stephen. Can I just make a comment about the free cash?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, and I think this is somewhat of an editorial comment in that and I think in terms of making the request for tax relief purposes, it's a good one. But when you have high levels of free cash, it means you levied, taxpayers for services that didn't get provided, as it didn't get provided, the services got provided, they just levied for more than the town needed to provide those services. And so while I think we all want to see our reserves, our free cash reserves at a level that is, comfortable at least for our debt for our bond rating, I'm of the mindset that, you know, parking money just for that purpose, you know, isn't always a great choice. And so levying for money you don't necessarily need to operate and then giving it back in free cash as tax relief, you know, to me, I'd rather just not levy for it in the first place. So I think that's one of the things that as we, and I think in the two budgets Carrie and I have worked on together, I think we've really tried to do that. And I think we will continue to do that. So, you know, there's robust free cash numbers are a just two-sided coin, I think is what I would just say.
I agree. Actually, I agree with you, Stephen. The 5% seems to be inviolate. You have to keep that just to keep the bond rating, and anything above that, I think you want some little cushion because you're going to come up with unanticipated one-time expenses every year. But then above that might be something, why do we have all this? Why are we levying so much property tax to just hold it? So I tend to agree with you. I'm wondering if it would be worthwhile to look deeper into this and kind of establish a policy. What kind of a free cash balance do we really want?
I mean, I think the 5 to 10% is a good guide because, you know, free cash is, and you guys all know this. I mean, but free cash is it's a result of a few things. It's conservative budgeting on both expenditures and revenues, and then you have either you have cost reduction through, you know, efficient operation, so you lower the operating cost side, and then you may have better than expected performance on tax collections, local receipts, things like that. The last 2 years have been, you know, I think a bump in the road for those kinds of things, but I think we fully expect that in the next few years we'll see a strong comeback. So it's not always just you levy too much, but that is one of the factors that yields it. And so I think that 5 to 10% gives you the flexibility to say, you know, we had a good year. We didn't spend as much as we thought we were going to because of efficiencies or grants or whatever. And we had a great year in receipts. And so we can either return that, you know, keep that in reserves, you know, around 8, you know, I think once you get north of 8%, I think you really have to say, why are we really sitting on this money?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think you want to look at it and be like, at 5%, we did the job. That's my 2 cents.
Yep. Okay. I do know that the Housing Authority has asked the Select Board to put together a warrant article again this year for $500,000. So I'd be interested in what's going to happen to our free cash reserve, our free cash percent balance, including the 1.461 that we have in hand but not certified. I'd like to know that percent. But not now, Carrie. You don't have to do it now, but eventually I would like to know that percent so that we know how close we are to that 5. Right? That's because
Sure, I can do that. If I could just add one more item. I think if you want to have a discussion about the level of free cash, you know, is it still 5 to 10%? Is that what we should be shooting for?
Yep.
I think it's important to take a look at all of the different categories that we get rated on by the bond rating agency. I know you've seen the scorecard, as we call it, and we would want to look at how we rate in each of those categories, because as you may recall, we're not AAA rated in each of those categories. And in fact, we're not AAA rated in a majority of those categories. We just happen to be extremely strong in certain categories. So we would want to make sure that if we say our free cash policy is not 5 to 10%, it's 5 to 7%, or that we are strong enough in those other categories and have a commitment to maintain those ratings so that that change in free cash in and of itself doesn't cause a problem for the bond rating.
Yep, good point. Okay, do we have any other questions for Carrie on the free cash?
I
don't
just
a
have
question.
one-
I have a comment about the way the balance has now trended for a few years. And that is that when we are at the top of our range, or sometimes as is shown in 2019, we're over the top of our range, this becomes an attractive pool for project-oriented warrant articles. And it just would be my preference not to see project-oriented warrant articles sort of pulling and drawing out of this fund. You know, that's just my call, but that it's my preference not to see these balances rise so that they become an attractive way of trying to fund specific targeted projects. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Dee, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just have one question for Carrie. Carrie, worst case scenario, and the auditor doesn't buy into the reserve funds. What would be our course of action?
I'm not sure I'm following your question.
Okay, so if our, the way that the left-hand side is structured right now, the balance of free cash would be 4.67%. If they did not, if they did not accept the money that we have in hand, but is not attributed to the current year. My question is, what would be our course of action to get the percent above 5%? Would it be just to not move article whatever on the property taxes?
So Carrie, I think I can take a stab at that, if you don't mind.
Nope.
So, I mean, if that was to happen, they would give us kind of a warning before they would actually, change the bond rating. And so we would have the chance in the preparation of, the next municipal budget, or you could have a special town meeting to make some adjustments. But in essence, it wouldn't just be, we don't buy that, we're dropping you. They would put us on, they would say, they would put on a negative outlook or a watch or something like that. So I think that we would then look at our assumptions going into the next fiscal year's budget. So I don't want to have the sense that there's kind of an immediacy, like a kind of a 1-2 punch. So I think that we would probably come back to the finance committee and say, we've been put on a watch or a negative outlook, and we think we need to change some of the way we approach the use of reserves and the accumulation of reserves.
So having a negative outlook would not impair our ability going forward in the next year?
Not immediately.
Not immediately.
Have we-
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Parashar, do you have a question?
No, Dee was still following up, I think. Sorry.
Okay. Dee, are you done?
Yes.
Okay. Parashar?
I'm curious, have we had an informal conversation with our bond rating agencies to give them a heads up of what might be coming down the pike and gotten a informal read?
We have. That's part of the conversation that we have with them each year when we go through our rating review.
Yep.
That we talk about the, how we're doing year to date in the current year budget, what the next year looks like, what type of capital projects and the magnitude of those we have coming forward. We even went so far a few years ago and said, okay, if we add an X million-dollar school project, what impact would that have? And we were told at that time that honestly, even a very large school project, all other categories remaining stable, would not have a negative outlook on our bond rating.
So I'm just curious about this particular situation. They said, oh, thanks for letting us know. And we kind of see where this is headed, and we're generally comfortable with the notion of, the 1.4 being calculated after the fact factored in.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even say for sure when the rating agency calculates 5 to 10% that they use the exact same calculation that I use. This is our total budget. It includes all of our debt spending. It includes everything. I don't know, it's a proprietary calculation on their part. I don't know if they take things out, and where I'm saying it's 4.67, they say it's 5.1. I just am not concerned with this use. Now, if we add another $500,000,
Mhm.
that spending, again, I think we can easily make a case that we're still in the spirit of things, we're still not below the 5%.
Okay.
Yeah, and I haven't been a part of one of those calls here yet, but I have been a part of a municipal bond rating call, and you do have the conversation is to put the data in context of the community. And I will tell you that unused levy capacity is the single biggest selling point we have in terms of offsetting any kind of,
Yep.
dim view of reserves. I mean, the town is in the fortunate position, it leaves a lot of taxing under Prop 2.5 levy capacity unused every year. And that is really a great thing for that's something that the bond rating agencies, I think, like to see.
This is Wade again. I just think, when the warrant items when the warrant items for the property tax relief and affordable housing get written, we just have to be careful about, in the past, we've used the 5% as kind of sacrosanct.
Mhm.
And we're right at that threshold,
Mhm.
and it's going to raise concerns. I mean, it did tonight, right? So
Yep.
we just need to be careful how those warrant item articles get worded, because in the past they've said 5% is the limit. And here again, this is an issue of accounting, because the actual is greater than 5%, but what's certified may be less than 5%. So it's
Well,
just,
remember though, Wade, we're not the authors of the article, right? It's the people that are authoring the article that have to address that.
I recognize that, but we need,
Right.
I mean, it's like, that needs to be part of the thought process.
Yes.
Yeah.
Certainly, maybe our reaction and recommendations during the meeting. I agree, Wade.
Okay. I think we're done here, right, Carrie?
Yes.
Anybody have any other questions for Carrie on free cash? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Parashar now to give us a quick update on some of the peer data that we have. This came about because I remember I presented to you some comps for property tax for a house in neighboring towns, and that was presented to the Board of Selectmen by Lane Partridge, our assessor. And then Parashar went off and did a deeper dive based on some information that Carrie had sent out to us, and he's collected that. And I thought I'd give him like 5 minutes to show us what he's learned. So Parashar, you want to?
Yeah, thanks, Carrie. And I think the slide was in the package, but let me go ahead and share so the rest of the community can see it. So as Mary said, I think there's been lots of conversations around tax burden on Concord residents. We've got a potential new school building coming up. There's other facilities that need improvements over time. So the question was, geez, how is our tax burden relative to other towns? And so I think it was Phil that sent around some data from Department of Revenue. It's online, everybody can have access to it. And basically what they do is for all of Massachusetts cities and towns, they provide a number of statistics, including per capita income, average single family house value, and then they calculate, there's a calculation there in terms of the average tax bill and then relative to per capita income. And so what I thought would be kind of neat is to try to compare Concord relative to other similar towns. And, first pass attempt is similar towns. I just thought made sense to do it based on per capita income and average.
Marshall, can I interrupt for 1 second? Can you
Yeah.
just click slideshow so the thing becomes larger? The
Yep.
numbers are very tiny on top of the chart, that's all.
How's that?
A
Beautiful.
little better. Yeah, thanks.
Good. So basically selected similar towns based on per capita income and single family household, and towns that are geographically closer to us. So, Martha's Vineyard, for example, I excluded. Other towns further away, kind of excluded. And you could see at the bottom the towns that are there. One town which folks might see, gee, why is it there, is Sudbury. Probably similar per capita, similar single family house values, but there was no income, or I'm sorry, there was no data other than I think per capita income for Sudbury. So data was missing, so I dropped Sudbury from the analysis basically. And you can kind of see, you know, from 2018 data to the latest fiscal year 21 data, we're about in the middle of the pack, as I said. It's a statistical term, middle of the pack, but we're pretty much in the middle. And then the next question was, geez, you know, we've got a school building that's being discussed, $100 million potential or maybe higher cost. And if you borrow that money, Carrie's done this estimate for us, we're all familiar with it. It adds about $1,085 to the average tax bill. And so if you add $1,085 to our current tax bill, you can kind of see what happens. We go from about 12.1% of per capita income, average tax bill, to 12.9% basically. So it raises the property tax bill by about 0.7%. I'm sorry, not property tax bill. It raises the property tax bill by about 7%, 6.7%. But relative to per income, per capita income, the percentage, it's only about a 0.7 percentage point increase. Still kind of in the middle of the pack, basically, is kind of what I took away from it. And so you could say, well, on the one hand, it's not that big of an impact, but I will note on the other hand, you know, it's a 6.7% increase in the 2021 bill, and all other factors being equal, that 6.7% is going to be in place for the next 20 years, basically, until the debt is paid off and it can be decreased. So long story short, that's a summary. Some folks may say, well, per capita income is not the right measure. I would probably tend to agree. You'd want to look at median household income, but that's not available on the DOR website. Census data apparently isn't granular enough for DOR to use that. So at a high level, that's the analysis. Happy to answer any questions, happy to share the raw data if anybody wants to dig into this further.
I have a question. The scale or the percentages, like I'm looking at Wellesley and Western, you know, being down around, you know, 6-7%. I mean, how do we read this? I mean, I think of I think of those towns, especially Wellesley, as, you know, having a lot of town services. How can their rate be so much lower than ours?
Well,
How do we get there?
so that's a good question. And let me just share the table and you'll see the raw numbers for a minute here. If I can, there we go. You'll see the raw numbers. And again, there's a lot of data. I'm happy to send this around to folks. And I will make this larger. Can you guys see the numbers here? So if this is basically 2021, and, you know, to answer your question, Kathy, you can kind of see Wellesley down here. Basically, their single family value is $1.4 million. If you compare that to Concord, it's almost 40% higher. And then if you take a look at their per capita income, you know, it's almost double Wellesley's. So that it's a combination of those two things that in essence is affecting the percentage. If you take a look at the average tax bill, it's about, you know, it's only $2,000 higher than Concord, but it's the fact that their incomes are much higher that gets you to that lower number.
It's also the total town valuation. If you look at column D,
Yep.
Wellesley's valuation compared to Concord's.
Okay, thank you. It's helpful.
Parsha, just a question. The add-on, you said it was, once we add the debt of the public, of the new school, that goes to 12.88.
Yep.
So I was just curious to know if there's any data. I mean, we have some debt servicing that would eventually sunset, which would reduce the tax burden. And I think that that's actually coming up. So I'm just trying to, did you have an opportunity to do any analysis around that? I'm particularly thinking about the high school and trying to understand, while we might see this spike here because we're just about to get started with a new school, that sunsetting is actually in effect now. And I'm just trying to, it would be helpful to understand what that looks like and at what year do we hit that?
Yeah, so Brian, completely fair question. That's why I said all other things being equal. So I did not do that analysis. It could easily be done. But this was just done to give folks a flavor for, flavor for the numbers and context, but it could easily be done. I didn't take it out 20 years.
And in the 20 years, who's to say we're not going to replace another school? So, this may never sunset, right?
Well, maybe, but again, in fairness, that's why I added the caveat, all other factors being equal.
Right.
You can't say it may never sunset because it's for another project. That's a separate
issue.
You don't really attribute that to the school at that point. So.
How much of our current tax bill is paying for the high school? Do we know that?
Carrie?
It's about 400, isn't it, Carrie? Does that ring a bell? It was on your.
So the debt associated with the high school is about half of our exempt debt. And boy, I don't have it handy. I can look it up and put it in, I think, in the Q&A.
Yeah, I don't want to sidetrack the
Yeah,
conversation. I just thank you for that. And I'd be happy to take that offline.
Thank you.
But this discussion is indicative of some of the things we've talked about earlier in the year about the need for capital planning, right? So
Yes.
that you can time when the debt is going to peak and you can try and keep it as flat as you can. So you're not torquing the tax bill based on when you're adding buildings, right? So you have a way to control it. That's why capital planning is really important to this.
Well, I guess I'm sorry, Mary. I guess what I'd say is to Parashar's comment, you can't if you take it out 20 years, you can no longer say all things being equal. That falls off the table because not all things are not going to be equal if you take it out 20 years, because debt loads will naturally go down if no other new debt is added. And I think that, and Chris, this is actually playing to your point. It's, we do capital planning. I think it's more debt scheduling and debt management that I think is what you're saying. And that's been a real focus for the capital planning task force for the larger debt exclusive projects. So, and Parashar has been a big part of that. So I don't want to derail that conversation, but it is definitely, you're 100% right. But I think it's the graphic, which I think is illustrative, is a good snapshot, but it's just that, it's a snapshot.
Great. Thank you for that, Parashar. Thank you. Anybody have any other questions? Okay, great. I'm moving on to our next agenda item, which is the middle school project discussion. And you're probably wondering how we got here tonight, because there is no warrant article on this year's town meeting for the middle school. That will be a special town meeting, hopefully at the end of the year. But I'm going to give you a little bit of history of how we got here tonight to kind of frame the conversation. I'm just going to start with in 2017, briefly bring us up to date to where we are and what we're going to be discussing tonight. So in 2017, the school committee recommended that we merge the two separate Sanborn and Peabody middle schools into one. And they gave an estimate of an SMBA school, which cost about $63 million. And then they also gave another estimate for an MSBA school that had a larger gym and a larger auditorium, which would come in at about $68 million. So that was in the year 2017. And then in 2009, fast forward to 2019, after two failed attempts to get MSBA funding, we went to town meeting with a warrant article for $1.5 million feasibility study and a schematic design. At that time, we added some escalation factors to those numbers. We also added some escalation factors for expected construction cost increases for future years when the school would actually be built. And the expectation given at that town meeting was about 90 million. So when the actual warrant article passed, and we did in fact begin the feasibility study, the working group, the middle school building committee, had a working budget of 80 to 100 million. That was their working budget. They started to meet, then we had COVID, they took a break, and then they came back. And they actually came together with a design, a schematic or design, and put it forward in front of the middle school building committee. And the reason we're talking about that now is the feasibility study will kick off into the schematic design sometime at the end of May. And of course, we want to have, that design will in fact inform what the actual cost will be. So the decisions we make now relative to the design and the footprint of the school will go into the actual schematic design and will come up with the price tag that we bring to town meeting in the fall. So like I said, the middle school building committee was given a design and they voted unanimously to accept this design. And this design included all of the educational aspects that the administration wanted for team teaching, and it included some community amenities such as one regulation size gym and an auditorium, I think that seated 270 people. So that was voted unanimously. And then the community gave some feedback. The community had some reaction to that proposal and the middle school building committee came together and asked if they could get input from both the finance committee and the select board to their vote. So that's why we're here tonight. We're here tonight because the middle school building committee asked us if we would in fact discuss the design that was voted and other alterations that may or may not occur to that design. So the way I would like to approach this tonight is I've asked the middle school building committee to come in and talk to us about, how did they get to where they are today? After that, I'm going to have Dean give a brief presentation as our observer to that committee. He's the closest to that committee of any of us. So I've asked him to give a brief presentation. Then I'm going to open it up to the committee for any questions, anything they want clarified from either Dean or the middle school building committee. And then finally, I would like to go around and get each of ours comments or any kind of comments or opinions that we want to have as input to the middle school building committee, because that's why we're here. That's what they've asked us for. So with that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Greg. You have a question?
Yes. Can I just say my piece here for everybody that knows, because there's a lot of people attending the call today. Dawn Guariello, my wife, is on the Concord. She is the co-chair, along with Pat Nelson, of the Concord Middle School Building Committee. And as such, Mary, I will refrain from this conversation and go mute. So Anita, if you could put that in the notes, please.
Thank you, Greg.
Mary, can I just add that if we could promote Dawn, she's on as Perkins Eastman, Chris, and make her a panelist, that'd be great.
Yeah, Chris.
Got it.
Thanks.
Okay, so I am turning it over now, I believe, to Dawn and Pat. Pat, you're here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to the Finance Committee for letting us come and just get some input from you. And that's really all we want tonight. We've gone through a long process of making sure that we've got a great design for a great school. And it's following the ed plan, which we're very excited about. But we're now getting a lot of feedback from the community. And so we really just wanted to give the Finance Committee and the Select Board an opportunity to weigh in on it. So this is really a conversation, and I appreciate you taking the time. We have a brief presentation that Kristen Olson from SMMA, our architects, is going to just walk through very short, just to give you some context of where we are and how we got to where we are. And then, as Mary said, we can open it up. So Kristen, thank you.
Great. So this is the goals slide that I think Pat already spoke very well to, as well as Mary's intro. So I won't spend any time here. In your packet, you will have had this whole slide deck. And so you're aware we're currently evaluating 2 schedule scenarios with the building committee that are represented here, and we can come back to if there are questions. We've also been looking very closely at cost analysis, and the building committee asked us to provide some background on where the Concord Middle School target is in relationship to other building projects. And so this chart is from the Mass School Buildings, MSBA, Mass School Building Authority website, and you can access it using that link. And then we also pulled from the whole plethora of projects that includes elementaries, middles, ad renos, and so on, high schools. We pulled we attempted to pull some more comparable middle schools. And so these 2 slides represent some of the costs that go into those more comparable schools. Although you can see here at the bottom, they do differ, and we've made some notes on how they differ. You'll never get quite apples to apples. So this slide and the next have a list of those projects. And then up here in the upper right, we've captured what the average cost per square foot is for these different summary items. And so right now we are actually planning for $348 per square foot for building only. So we're actually right in line with what this median is from the projects that are summarized. This slide speaks to, this is a graphic representation of all the spaces that are in the current space summary that was approved by the building committee on March 4th. And the highlighted spaces that are called out are the spaces that changed from our 2020 space summary. So everything that is not dashed in and highlighted is substantially alike to what we had in 2020. The major changes are just dashed and called out. Then we have a couple floor plans that are representative of where we are at today. Before we, after the March 4th space summary approval, we put pen to paper and started to update our floor plan concepts. And at that time already, we knew that there was an interest in seeing the larger gym represented. So on the upper half of the slide, you see what is in the current ed plan and space summary approved by the building committee with the single MIAA court, that is the single MIAA main court with 2 smaller cross courts. And here below, because we had already received that direction from the building committee and asked to show 2 adjacent MIAA cross courts over 1 MIAA main court. So that's kind of a comparison of what the 2 floor plans might look like in concept. And then just in closing, a 3-dimensional rendering showing you a little bit more site context where the site itself, though large, it does have the existing Sanborn School off to the right-hand side of this image where there can be no construction, and we're steering clear of that. So the building really pushes up against the flat part of the plateau and has the parking out here in front of the gymnasium and so on, with fields that would be developed in front of the academic wing. This is where most of the classrooms are. And then to the right, where the existing Sanborn School will be removed and replaced with fields. So again, I'm happy to pull up any of those slides or the additional 3 slides that are available to speak to some of those extra community asks as we go through Q&A, but we really wanted to make sure we had sufficient time for exactly what your questions and discussion might be.
Dean, would you like to go next before we open it up for Q&A?
Yeah, sure. No problem.
Thank you.
Let me get myself queued up here with a share screen. Here. Okay, let me get myself in the slideshow. Okay, why is slideshow not slideshow? Come on. There we go. Is that everybody see that in large scale?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just looking at this. Kristen did a nice job of showing you a few particular statistics that are baked into this. One of them is the number $555 a square foot. So that's included here, so that these numbers are using what Kristen is talking about. Basically, if we were to be functioning under an MSBA contract, and they were partnering with us, the blue bar that you see, which takes us up to about $82 million, would be what I would call the default MSBA school. That would include a 6,000 square foot gym. It would not include an auditorium at all. You would get a cafetorium with a stage at the end of the auditorium. When any town, and probably in excess of 90% of towns in the Commonwealth, build their schools from the ground up using the MSBA process, because it's so expensive to just go on your own. When any town negotiates and works with the MSBA, almost no towns end up with what we'll call the base or default MSBA metrics school. They say we have these special characteristics of our ed plan. We have this special population we need to serve. We have our needs that exceed here and there what you specify we should be building. And we looked at a number of schools. We looked at a wide number. They range in excess over the default school from 4 to 8%, but the average is around 5%. So if you take our $82 million school, you end up with an $86 million school with a $4.1 million lift there. So the bottom of this slide basically says, if we were working with the MSBA, this school would cost about $69 million. Not working with the MSBA, this very straightforward school that almost any town in the Commonwealth would build with its own little puts and takes that gets them an extra 5%, would be an $86 million school. I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm not able to go forward on my slide. Here we go. When our ed plan was finalized, we added an additional 11%. So we are up beyond the MSBA by 16%. This is for a number of reasons. The team teaching approach we want to have. We have a lot of unscheduled spaces. We have teachers who have continuity in their classroom all day long, whether there's a class in there or not in there. There are numerous, puts and takes that we have accommodated, but that has accounted for an additional 11% beyond what most schools are. And this building would cost us $95.6 million. But still, it has a cafetorium and a 6,000 square foot gym. Okay, so 95.6 million gets us a cafetorium and a 96, but it takes care of every characteristic that was requested in the ed plan. We then added another slice for 1,000 net square feet in the gymnasium, and that cost us another $1 million to get the standard basketball court. And we added an auditorium, which is not standard with a MSBA style school. And these are additions that we did because these are strong community preferences that need to be attended to. And this has taken us right up to the edge at 99.2 million. And that's where we were when we voted on March 4th, when the school committee voted on March 4th for the plan. And the next phase would be, what do we do to attend to the additional needs that are now being requested by the community? Okay, to add a 350 seat auditorium instead of a 270 is a pretty modest add. I'm sorry, I went backwards and forwards. Here we are. $1 million. There's problems here. It creates impervious surface to add enough parking to satisfy people actually coming to use the auditorium. So there are site constraints that are in addition to the fact that it costs $1 million to just add the seats. The extra 6,000 square feet of gymnasium space would be another $6.2 million. And now we are beyond the limits that were originally established by the building committee between 80 and $100 million to build the building. So we've satisfied all of the educational requests. We've added a limited number of community requests, and these new requests are pushing us beyond. So that's the limits of my, how do I get out of this now? Stop share. So that's my spiel, just to let the finance committee know sort of how we've built that layer cake to get where we are. A basic school that most communities would build around 86 mil, and now we're at 99 for the school we want, and now we want these additional amenities. So that just pretty much says it all right there.
Thank you, Dean. I'm going to open it up to the Finance Committee for any questions, any clarifying questions that we have for either Dean or Kristen or any of the people from the Middle School Building Committee that are here with us tonight.
Dean, it's Chris. So the gym space at 6 million, the second basketball court, that's $6 million. Is that right?
That's correct. Well, that's the largest ask, Chris, that has been made. There are obviously a range of possibilities. The current gym that is specified would allow for a high school level game in the long direction, but the short direction, if you had two courts going in the short direction, they're below the size of a middle school regulation court. A middle school regulation court is 74 feet long. So one way to solve the problem is just to create enough width so that you can have middle school level courts, and the girls team and the boys team can practice in there after school for the interscholastic games that they have. And that would be a modest increase to from 7,000 to about 8,600. To get up to this new 13,000 gets us 2 high school level cross courts.
Right.
It's quite a large leap from there.
And the cost per square foot for what's pretty much, floors and a ceiling is the same as what we would have in the rest of the building? I'm just trying to understand how you
I'm
get
going
to
to defer
6
that to
million.
Kristen. When you're building a building, you can't say this space doesn't cost as much as that space. It's not really fair to the process of.
Okay.
Correct
So
me if I'm
they
wrong.
they don't have a marginal cost for it.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's just not it's not fair, because then you say, oh, the science labs, oh, those are much more expensive. We shouldn't build those, because
Right.
those are expensive. Well, let's
Okay.
just build some regular. It just isn't how it's done. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, to that end though, Kristen, maybe can you just clarify something you said? I think that your chart said that the cost was 348 per square foot. And then Dean, you had mentioned something about 550 per square foot. So I'm just a little confused on what's the square footage what's the price of the square foot that we're dealing with?
The 348 that we were speaking about is strictly the building, and the 555 that Dean is speaking to is total construction cost. And so there are a number of ways to do cost analysis. And when we were early on in the study, we had broken out the building costs from site, abatement, and demo, because abatement and demo, we had concrete numbers on. Site, we had limited changes to, and the building was really what was being really worked on through the ed plan. So we divided those up.
Thanks.
Kristen, I think you came with slides about the additional spaces. I wonder if we could just take a minute and have you show those.
Sure. So we've been working, sorry about that, toward providing this data for the building committee meeting that's coming up on April 8th.
I think we lost you, Kristen.
But she's still there. Oh, look at her. Yeah.
I'm not hearing her. Are other people hearing her?
I think
No, her image is frozen on my screen.
Gym currently in the plan, and that's a net square foot.
Kristen, you had frozen.
Can you
Yeah.
back up a little bit? Because you froze and we missed a lot of your audio. So
Oh, sorry about that. Well, hopefully it sticks this time. So I think the biggest nuance is that SMMA has been working on showing a range that is between the net square foot and gross square foot. Some of Dean's numbers do in fact align, I think, pretty well with these. But we have it one way in the individual line items, and then one way as combinations, because we're anticipating that it might be a combination of a larger auditorium and a larger gym. So we have it recorded both ways. But we do believe that any growth would be between this net square foot and gross square foot range.
So the difference between this and the numbers that Dean showed us is this includes the 3.5 million for a larger auditorium. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that, Dean, correct me if I'm wrong, you were showing the 2 MIAA cross courts, which is
That's
this
right.
line, and then the added 80 auditorium seats, which is this line. And that's on the basis of 350, getting to 350. And the reason why we projected this one out is because that's what the existing Sanborn gym has. In last year's study and currently, we're still showing a 550 example, because that would be 2 grade levels with teachers and staff. As an alternative for the building committee to discuss. We do have more current information from CCYB that noted that they may not require 2 full MIAA cross courts. And so that is what this red line here is 246 by 74 cross courts. And so those are just slightly under MIAA size, but that's what CCYB noted as being a good size for practice in their eyes.
So to comment on my numbers versus these, my numbers are the ones in the right-hand column, the 6.2 and the 80 seat ad, which is the 1 million. And when I was giving my little comments, I did say that an 8,600 square foot gym would be 2 cross courts, and this is exactly what this slide is showing, which is these cross courts are middle school regulation. So that would be 2 middle school regulation cross courts.
Okay. So I'm just trying to understand. So the building committee concluded that we didn't need these things for the education purpose of the school. The community has come back and asked some questions about additional gym space or additional auditorium space. And that feels to me, and maybe I have this wrong, but it feels to me, since that's outside of what the building school committee has asked for, is this not something that the rec group, that the town's recreation, in particular in the case of the gym, would be asking for, or perhaps should be discussed in terms of a plan overall for the town in terms of recreational facilities? It just strikes me as a strange place for it to come up here, is we don't have enough basketball courts in the town, and so we'd like to add them to the school, unless I'm misunderstanding it.
I guess I'll answer that oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll speak to that on behalf of the town. The project it's a middle school project. And so as a member of the building committee, I certainly didn't come into this enterprise with a view of how can I expand rec space and rec programs into the project, because it is a middle school. That said, that's a kind of a narrow administrative way for me to look at it. The community that we're hearing from has a different view, and there are I know there are precedents for this type of thing in Concord that predate me, but that are examples of community partnership with school projects. And so I guess to answer your question, Chris, we didn't look at it from the jump, so to speak, as a rec opportunity. I just came into this looking at it strictly as a middle school.
Right. But if we were to think about looking at it that way now, I mean, I don't really have any information on utilization of basketball courts or gyms in the town. So has anyone looked at that? I mean, do understanding people's desire and looking at this project and say, gee, you could make it bigger. Is it really a need that we have? Or do we have any data that would tell us it was a need? Maybe that's the way to ask it.
Chris, I think this goes back to your capital planning.
You're right. Right.
You know,
Well,
the next thing to come up is,
right.
are we gonna need a bigger recreation center, enlarge the Hunt Gym, or something else to accommodate what we're looking at right now? We don't know, because there isn't any general plan.
Well, we just heard from, Kate and Stephen, they look out 5 years, so that's sort of what I was trying to link this to, is that, understanding that people are asking the question, we need more recreational space. Is this something that can be accomplished through our normal town planning for capital projects? I guess that's what I'm trying to understand. And do we need it? Do we have evidence that we need it?
Sorry.
Wait,
Oh.
I've got people with hands up. Chris, do you think you got an answer to your question? Or you've got a request out there for data?
Yeah, see, I'm interested in people's thoughts, so I'm done. I'm done.
Okay, so I heard your question as, do we have data as far as how much it would be used?
If it's
And is
helpful,
this
the building committee has received some usage information from CCYB that could be provided. So there is some part of that data that's available, I believe.
Do you have any of that off the top of your head, Kristen, as far as how many children are in the CCY?
I don't think it's just children, right? And I just want to comment on. I just want to comment on the idea of the capital planning process and how that would relate to this. And Parashar can hopefully back me up on this as the observer, but there are times where capital projects or physical projects, even if they're not capital, that work gets done because of opportunities that emerge that weren't foreseen before, or there's some circumstantial change. And so to Andrew, to your question, is this something that could come up in the course of a normal capital plan? Sure. But is there a way of looking at this that says that this is an opportunity to do some work or make an investment that is timely versus something that would be in a part of a 5-year plan? So the point is, there are times where things come up that are timely that at least call for some attention to whether or not they're worthwhile investments.
I think I have a small question.
Go ahead, Kathy.
As it relates to that point, and then I have another question that I've been holding on.
Go
The
ahead.
current middle schools, do they have basketball courts today?
They both do, and they're both undersized.
They both do, and they're both undersized. So there is some facility today, and it being used. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
My other question had to do with the slides on the comparatives to other schools built. And if we can go back to that, if not, I'll defer my question till later.
We can go back to that. Kristen, can you go back to that? I knew she could.
Okay, again, I think this is a simple question. Every comparable school has all these lines that say included above, but we've got millions of dollars in these line items. Can someone explain that to me?
Yes, so what it is that these percentages and breakdown of the markups, when this data is pulled from the MSBA website, we just included totals of the breakdown. For the Concord project, we provided the detailed breakdown in percentages, but when you go to the MSBA cost data slide or information, we just included the total of markups because some of them are different.
Okay.
They would have been different over time, so it wouldn't have aligned with these percentages, just because they're past projects, different sites, different years.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question while we have the slide up? I'm jumping ahead of other people, I'm sorry, but if I just look at this slide and I look at the total construction cost, let's say for Braintree South, for example, Braintree South Middle School. So there's 800 students and the total construction cost is 69 million. Is that the comparable to our working 80 million? So is this just the construction cost that we're looking at here? Or is this the total project cost?
That is just the construction cost, so it's comparable to the 80 million.
So they're building a school for 800, that's going to cost them about 69 million construction, right? And then if I did some other comparables, do they have team teaching? Does anybody know if they, I'm trying to do some comps here. Do they have,
It's not the same team teaching we're proposing. Team teaching is used in
do
multiple.
any of these schools have team teaching that we could do that?
In the pure, not per se, they do a lot of split team. You remember our terms of split and dirty teams? That's very common. And we're looking for clean teams because that's how you really are able to be effective. So I don't know each of these schools per se that I could answer, but I know that's far more typical.
Okay, can we go to the next slide on here, please, Kristen? I'm just, again, I'm looking, so here's a, Somerset has 590 and theirs was 70 million, 630, 77 million. Okay, thank you. I think Parashar, you want to ask?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. It was interesting, these two slides, and thank you, Kristen, for putting in the cost construction per student, because I think that really provides, from my layman's perspective, really a good comparable versus square footage. And when you do this cost per student, we're pretty high, and there are probably good reasons for it. I'm not questioning why we're high. We're also higher in terms of square footage per student. And I'm curious, is that because of the educational plan and the team environment, teaching style, or what accounts for that aspect of it? I'm just curious. In other words, why does it have to be so much larger than some of the other schools when you look at square footage per student?
Well, there are a number of factors that go into that. A lot of that would be skewed through the special education program, or if you have a very large gym but the same number of students. So I see here the Braintree South Middle School example is 800 students, but it has 8,000 square foot gym plus a 3,000 square foot second gym and an adaptive PE. So those are all spaces that aren't, that are just used by one or two classes, but they're not representative of a classroom density use. So that would skew the construction cost or the space per student.
And so is that space not included in the gross square foot? Because I took a look at the gross square foot at the top and divided it by the number of students, and we were at 204. And if you take a look at the other schools, the range is 260 for Millbury all the way down to 172 for Weymouth. So I was kind of curious.
I can give you a little bit of information on that. If you're looking at Weymouth, for example, that is a base MSBA school using all their metrics plus 7%. So they got a big gym, but it's a huge school. They got a big gym, they got some adaptive PE, they got all kinds of stuff going on there. But they got all of that with MSBA's model plus 7%.
Yeah.
But if you look at Framingham, it's a real outlier there. And I looked at this one because this is really tough to understand. Framingham has about 210 square feet per student, and we have about 204. And so that's even higher than ours. Why? Why would Framingham build such a huge school per square foot? Well, it turns out what they have is a very significant English as a second language population. So they built a whole parallel set of classrooms in that building to accommodate a parallel science class going on in ESL while somebody else is learning science in English. So they had a very specialized population, which they appealed to the MSBA and said, we really need a lot of this space in order to do this. So that's how Framingham got explained to me. I had to go look at that one because it really is quite an outlier. But most of these, when you adjust for the fact that the community has paid for a large gym or it's paid for a large auditorium, and you kind of take that out of the equation, these are between that range that I said before, the basic MSBA building plus about And I'll say in this grouping that you have here, it ranges from about 5% to maybe up to 10%. We are at 16%, just so you know, that's where we are. So we've got a lot of space.
Yep.
We're spending money on space.
Mary, just two other points, and this is more commentary. So, I had a comment or a thought similar to Christine and others. I'm curious, normally when you do a project, you do a needs assessment, just like what was done here. And I can sympathize, as Stephen said, with, there's an opportunity, let's do something. I get that and agree. But what I don't really see, and maybe, the schools have it, you guys have it, but a true needs assessment, that's a little bit more than maybe a statement. I haven't seen the data that you have from CCYB or whatever, but like, what is the needs assessment done for expanding the gym beyond what the school committee, the building committee originally envisioned? And where's the needs assessment for expanding the auditorium, right? I mean, we've got a lot of voices from the community, but I don't really see a rigorous needs assessment. So that's sort of one comment. And I think the other comment is, I think what I heard and what I've read is CCYB and others will use the gym, which is great, but I'm kind of curious whether there's any commitment in terms of a dollar amount of using the gym, or what the thoughts are by the schools. Do they normally charge community groups for using the facilities? And is there some sense of how much revenue can be derived realistically to maybe offset the additional costs? I haven't seen that. And then the last point I'm going to make, and again, this is just commentary to consider, is, as I said earlier during my presentation, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it's in context, right? Those that have fixed incomes, $1,000 extra bill is going to be larger. And so one of the questions I have, again, we received, God, how many letters from folks supporting this? I'm just kind of curious, for those that are supporting spending the extra money because it's only 5 million or 6 million, I'm kind of curious, have there any ideas been generated or discussed about how to offset the additional costs that folks on fixed incomes will be bearing as a result of an extra 6 million or 7 million, whatever it turns out to? So I don't need an answer for that. I'm going to get off my high horse and keep my mouth shut. But there's just some of the things I think I would encourage the entire community and the school committee and the building committee to think about as you make a decision.
Thank you, Parashar. Dee, you've got your hand up. Would you like to ask questions, make comments? What would you like to say?
I have both.
Go ahead.
Probably at this time. The first thing I wanted to know is a question I have is, what is the average class size at the middle school?
Sure. So our current average class size is just a little bit over 20. The new school, based on
I'm sorry, for the whole grade size, excuse me.
Oh,
Like sixth grade, seventh grade,
oh,
eighth grade.
per grade. Sure.
Yes,
sure.
sorry.
So we're at about 270 right now.
Okay, so you're at about 270 right now.
Mhm.
So the original auditorium is 280.
270, right, Kristen?
The existing Sanborn is 350. The proposed is
Proposed.
270.
270, okay. All right. And
So
then.
do you,
class
those
size
numbers
is
align on
270.
purpose, right? Those numbers
me?
align on purpose. So the design right now has a 1 grade level
A
availability.
1 grade level, and that includes teachers, I would
Yeah,
assume,
correct.
right?
Yep.
Okay.
We expect a
all right,
little bit of declining enrollment, so that'll compensate for the teachers.
Okay, for the 270. Another question that I have is, this regards the $1.5 million that you have in your budget for the demolition and hazmat cleanup. And I'm wondering, there must be other things that have been deferred. For example, I'm wondering, with the net zero, if it's net zero ready, does that mean it is complete? So I'm wondering what has been deferred from this? For example, the net zero, possibly parking, landscaping, and I'm wondering about the costs associated with that and how are those going to be paid for?
So Dee, maybe we could do one thing at a time. The 1.5 is what you mentioned at the beginning, is that right?
That is correct, and that is dedicated to demolition and hazmat. So
Right,
I'm assuming that's the Sanborn building, right?
correct. Yep,
Okay. So are there any other costs in your current budget for parking, for the net zero completion, and for landscaping?
The parking is currently compliant with the zoning bylaws for the school as designed. So
The
there would be
school is
no
designed right
deferred.
now.
Yep, so there would be no deferred parking. Landscaping, it has been, budget has been allocated to serve the school as designed, so there would be no deferred landscaping.
Okay,
The fields and everything meet the current ed plan.
okay,
And then the PV, we've had conversations with Municipal Light and with the town with Stephen's office, and that is not part of the middle school building project. So the active PV renewable system is not part of the project, but the PV ready is the project.
okay. So that would be at a future time. And it might come through the CMLP.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
Could
So-
I answer that? Dee, could I just be a little more specific on that point? So,
Okay.
basically CMLP will develop the PV. It's going to require battery storage to do a PV array of that size, and so it'll be a CMLP project. CMLP will own the array, the battery, and use it as a part of their energy management system.
Okay.
And we've already had that conversation. So the design of it is concurrent with the design of the school, and our intent is to have it, built onto the school as soon as that can be done, as soon as the school is ready to have it built on. So I don't want to say a future date. It is very much a part of this planning process. It's just not a part of the school project itself.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. The next question I have then would be if, as you were saying, you have included the costs associated with the current design. So if we went to a larger capacity in the auditorium to 350, then there would be other concerns that have not been costed. Is that correct? Have not been included in your cost? If we went to 350, if we went to the 350 person capacity in the auditorium, you've come up with $1 million for the cost of that for the building, but that would not include additional parking.
Correct.
Okay, and similarly with the construction of a different gymnasium, a larger gymnasium, that is just for the building and it's not for additional parking.
Also correct.
Okay, and so, do you anticipate any concerns with regards to the amount of parking that you could have?
I would, so in terms of the zoning bylaw, there's nothing that governs increased quantity of parking over what we have shown in the design. But I would actually defer to Lori on her experience because they have a 350 seat auditorium and how perhaps the current lot serves when it's at capacity might be the best gauge.
At Sanborn?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a good scene there generally when we fill the auditorium. We're all up and down Old Marlboro. So that, there's a lot of challenges to that question that aren't quite resolved. It's certainly been part of the discussion. I think there's an understanding that more parking is complicated. It would come at the cost likely of field space and a waiver of the bylaw, which is an unknown at the moment. So that's about as far as we've gotten, I'd say. Kristen, would you agree on that?
Yeah, so I think the demand for parking is difficult to assess because if you do a 2-grade auditorium, say, then it's full of students, then you don't have more parking demand than the 134. if it, so it depends on your mix of what the auditorium is being used for, as
Okay.
to how many cars could be anticipated. And what Lori's referring to in terms of is the lot coverage restriction. And as the building grows, we create more and more impervious surface. And we
Right.
are right at that 15% limit right now without the added parking. And we are in a groundwater conservancy district.
Dr. Hunter, it strikes me that the frontage on Old Marlborough Road is pretty long. And it doesn't seem that if there's an evening event, that parking along that road is a problem. Has it ever been a problem?
We do it all the time.
Right, right,
Is
that's
it,
what I mean.
is it perfect? I would say probably it's not perfect. If you've traveled through there when we do it, but we do it.
Well, I live right near it, so
Yeah.
I haven't ever found it to be a problem, so.
Yeah, no, there's ways to manage it. We do it every day, even for bus and pickup at the moment, because COVID's got so much traffic coming through.
Any other questions?
No, that's it for now.
Andrea?
I just had a comment.
Okay, let's hold that off.
He brought up the parking issue.
Andrea, can
which,
I hold off your comment until I sweep through all the questions first? Can you hold that thought?
Okay, it's part of a question.
Okay, go ahead.
At noontime, sorry, Steve, you spoke at the Rotary meeting, and there was a comment about outdoor dining continuing, and the parking issue. And parking is always a problem in Concord, and down the road, the outdoor dining may not continue the way it is because of the issue of parking. The high school couldn't expand the parking because that was an issue. With such a large, enlarging the gymnasium and the auditorium, there's going to be a need for a place to put a lot more cars. If, as you say, it's going to be used by outside organizations, community organizations, but we're not talking about the kids. We're talking about people driving in cars to this facility to make use of this large gymnasium and auditorium, and where the car is going to go. And that's going to be something that will then come up as another issue later on. How do we pay for more parking? Because we have to have more parking. And that's, I don't know if that's been, well, I'm sure it's been thought of, but I don't know if there is any kind of projection or how this problem might be solved.
Mary, can I just speak to that briefly?
Yes.
So we haven't gone through the permitting process, Andrea, so I can't say either. But I'm not all that familiar with the permitting on a project like this in Concord. I think this is probably the first one's come along since I've been here. But and Kristen, I guess I'll step on your toes here, but I think there's a shared use argument to be made here that the parking won't all be needed all at the same time. So if there's parking demands during the school day for faculty and parents and everything else, I believe that community use of, say, for example, an expanded gymnasium would not occur during the school day. And so then the parking lot would be effectively mostly or completely cleared out by the time that use came along. But I haven't seen that analysis, so I can't tell you. I just know that from a planning doctrinal standpoint, they would look at the time of use as well as, the overall zoning requirements.
That's correct. At the athletic events at the middle school and the CCYB, what we're hearing how the gymnasium might be used would not be a tipping point for that lot size because of the time of day. It's more the auditorium and its planned use that would be the one to review very closely.
Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to ask if anybody has any broad questions to ask before we go around and give our comments, because that's why the middle school building committee is here to hear our thoughts on this request. Does anybody have any broad questions that they need to ask before they can come up with a cogent comment? Okay, great. Okay. Then I would really like to go around and hear people's comments, and I'm going to start. I believe we need a middle school, and I believe that the town of Concord is committed to having the best ed plan that we can possibly have for our students. And I think that the school that was designed offers that. It's really an awesome ed plan if you look at it. I think it's unfortunate right now that we're talking about incremental costs instead of looking at the whole project itself, because this is a massive project. This is the largest project the town has ever done. Just to give you a sense of scale, when we did the high school cost $64 million because we had MSBA funding, and that housed 1,200 students. And now we're talking about spending $100 million for 700 students. So that gives you a feel for the scale of this project. As Parashar mentioned before, we're spending, this will cost at 100 million, it's 1,085 incremental addition to the median tax bill for 20 years. And I think that's a big ask. The argument that since we're doing the school, well, we might as well add some more things to it. I challenge that argument because the Finance Committee has a unique perspective in town where we really see the whole town. We're really one of the only committees besides the select board that really sees the whole town. And we see requests for capital or requests for funds from many different organizations. So every dollar that we spend here means that someplace else, like maybe transportation services won't get funded, or maybe public service. The police department has been waiting in line for years for an improvement. It means that they're not going to get what they want in the time frame that they were hoping. So there are other competing interests in town, and I'm hopeful that there are other sources of funding for these types of incremental adds to this school that we could take advantage of and be creative about, like public-private partnerships, CPA, grants. I think we could spend some time looking at those sources of funding so that we can, in fact, keep within our budget and still keep a wonderful ed plan. So I take the budget seriously because I know that every dollar that we spend over this means that we can't spend it someplace else that would truly benefit the entire town, these other requests that we have. Resources are not unlimited. So I'm hoping that we keep the ed plan we have, that we don't make trade-offs there, and that we find other sources of funding for some of these incremental requests, because we already have a regulation sized gym, we already have an auditorium, and incrementally, I think we can be a little bit more creative about how we could fund that outside of burdening taxpayers that are already stressed by a $1,000 increase to their bill already. And I'll end there. So does anybody else want to say anything? I'm going to go around actually and ask people. And if you don't want to say something, that's fine. You can pass. Dee, would you like to start? Because you're up in my corner here. You're in the corner. Would you like to say anything or?
Talking to me?
No, Dee.
E. Oh, yes, I have several things I'd like to bring up. And Mary, I hear everything that you're saying and I agree. I think the educational plan is dynamic and will work for the future. But I have to take into consideration all of the comments that have been coming in to us, and in reflecting on those, I have a couple of opinions. I am in favor of an auditorium that is sized for 350 people, because if you have 270 students, even though those numbers, and I understand from the superintendent that the numbers are going down a bit of the number of students, but if you have 270 students and you have a 270 sized auditorium, that doesn't allow for parents, and parents are particularly interested in seeing their children in the auditorium performing. So I would like, I would encourage people to think about having a 350 person auditorium. With regards to the gymnasium, if you think about the transition that has occurred in the past 40 some years about the number of women and girls who play sports and actively participate in sports, and middle school is a time when it is formative in terms of real team sports, I think. I have 2 grandchildren who are in middle school and moving on. And when I would go to basketball games, which would be in the middle of the afternoon, they had at their school, they had 2 regular size courts, and the courts, both of them were always in play. And these were during games or during practices. And so I would be in favor of having 2 full-size gyms because I think there is a real need for it. And it's almost year round in terms of the variety of sports. A third point is, I hear what Parashar was saying when he was talking about, there are a lot of people in town, $1,000 a year increase in their taxes is going to be tough. I would encourage our finance committee to invite the assessor in to talk about what kind of options could be available in our town to look at this. What are other towns doing when they're building schools or have large expenses like this that they have to pay for? In terms of financing, I'd like our finance director to look at the funding possibilities of a 20-year bond as well as a 25-year bond, the difference in that, in the costs associated with that. And along the same lines, also ask the finance director to develop the debt load and a schematic that shows the debt load, our total debt load, not just for the school, but our total debt load, and show it over a 20 to 25 year period of time, knowing that there will be other projects coming along, but to show it at both a 100 million, the impact of $100 million school and the impact of, I'm going to say $120 million school. And those are my 5 points. Thank you.
Dean. Dean?
Yeah.
There you go.
I had an opportunity to give my slide deck, so I have very limited comments regarding the project, regarding the extra costs. The comment I would like to make here is that this is a front and center example of why we need a capital planning committee. This kind of extra project, which just kind of pops up out of nowhere and is now front burnered and it needs to be done, is not a process that the town really should have. We need a more structured way. Parashar noted that there's no underlying needs assessments. There's no, prep work done on this. It's just like, oh, we have to have this. So my comment is that this is something that I just would like this to be an example for why we need a capital planning committee that takes in this kind of information and would have it handy. Oh, we really need this. This needs to get on our radar, but we don't. We just have this random process. So that's my comment, and I'm done for now.
Thank you. Thank you. Chris.
Yeah, I just add a few things. Others have cited them. I'm a big fan of process. The process that the building school, the school committee, subcommittee on the building school there went through, it was a good process. They came out with a plan that supports the education plan. I think they came out where they needed to be. So to have something come up later and say, let's throw this on without good process, to me does not make sense. And so I'm not a fan of expanding the gym and the auditorium in an ad hoc way, which is how I feel this is being done. So I'm not a fan of it from a process perspective. From a cost perspective, we are at $100 million. And my gut, so having run large projects, more on the IT side than on a construction building, is we're at pretty good risk of going over 100 million already once we start doing this. And so when I listen to the conversation and I listen closely of that committee, I think they have some concern about their cushion or their contingency. So that's my speculation. So I'm very wary of adding even more cost to a project that I think is a big burden for the town to take on. And as Mary said, it's $100 million project already compared to anything else that we've done. It's really quite large. So those are my feelings.
Thank you, Chris. Parashar, you're up next. You're muted. There you go.
Thanks, Mary. So I'll reiterate a little bit of what I said earlier and add a couple other points. So first of all, I think thank you to Mark Caruso, who's on the chat. He provided a link to the CCYB data website, and I think that's sort of a needs assessment. From my perspective, that's a start of a needs assessment. But I do applaud them for trying to pull something together that's factually based. I would like to see something that is a bit stronger, a real true needs assessment for both the or not I would like, let me rephrase that, strike that. I would urge the building subcommittee, the school committee, the superintendent and others to develop a true needs assessment, a more in-depth needs assessment, not only for the basketball court, but the auditorium. I understand 700 kids, one classroom. I don't think you're ever going to see 270 kids in the auditorium at one time. For the plays, it's usually, having had a daughter involved in theater, when I told her about this, she said, well, geez, we were always excited when the auditorium was sold out at their school. And they were running four shows, right? 4 performances, but there was never any complaint about a parent or a grandparent not being able to see the play just because the first performance was sold out. So again, I think that just points in my mind to let's do, encourage you to do a needs assessment of what do we gain by adding. And then lastly, what are the trade-offs? I think somebody else mentioned this, that we're just doing an incremental add. And I'm torn, to be honest with you, because I think you guys did an excellent job in the initial assessment. You developed a proposal that was oriented around the education plan for the kids. Along comes this additional request, which frankly is a legitimate request from my perspective, but it needs to be backed up with data, I think, for everybody to understand what the trade-offs are. And what I didn't see, and maybe you've done it, but a little bit of, well, if we do this and we try to stay under budget of 100 million, here's kind of what we might lose, or here's what we can take off, but we only need $1 million extra. So some sort of analysis of what the trade-offs, I think, would be really helpful for the town, for us all to consider as we make this really important decision. Because I do agree, it's important to consider it now so we don't look back 10 years later and say we coulda, woulda, should have. But on the other hand, if we actually do a strong analysis, consider the alternatives and then go forward, I think the coulda, woulda, shoulda hopefully doesn't come about. So thank you for listening.
Thanks, Parashar. Wade, you're next.
I would agree with what Parashar just said. The only event that I can think of at the middle school where there wasn't capacity was middle school graduation. There was a limit to the number of parents that could attend, right? Everybody wanted to be there, but not everybody could be there. That's the one event that I could think of. But I think we need to look at the projected enrollment in the future and factor that in as well. I mean, the public response has been overwhelmingly positive to drive these additions, and we need to weigh that. We haven't seen any negative response, but I think that's just natural for the process. But when we see the full cost, we may hear that negativity from the community, but we haven't heard that yet. So I think we just need to have a better understanding of the needs for both the 2 full-size basketball courts and the 350 capacity in the auditorium. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Wade. Ray, I see you next.
Yes, couple thoughts. Yeah, as Phil Swain said before, I have a daughter who participated in the basketball program, and through knowing her and her teammates, development as people, as parents and as professional people, I was really impressed. And I think there's a big value, especially to women in today's environment, for opportunity to participate in team sports. So I would say that a gym that supports that, or recreational facility that supports that, is very valuable to the town. But how does the town pay for that? I mean, Parashar mentioned, other ways of generating revenue, either to pay for the gym, especially whether it's the Concord Youth Basketball, or whether it's the Recreation Department, or other users to generate revenue. I would be very much in favor of quantifying that, and also ways to reduce the impact on taxpayers of limited means in town. Yeah, presentation of trade-offs. Offering people, okay, for 100 million, you can have this bigger gym, but you're going to lose X and Y. I think if people can see that, it might result in a more informed decision on the part of citizens. That's my comments.
Thank you, Ray. Andrea?
I have three grandchildren in Brookline that are very, very active in sports. Go all the way up from 6th grade to juniors, both male and female. I have 2 grandchildren in Concord who are much more interested and active in the arts, music, theater. I understand the desire to have the biggest and best possible on both sides. I value academics. I think the academic plan is great. I think it's all done a fabulous job, really worked very hard. I'm not sure that I understand, having attended the basketball games and indoor soccer, whatever, and the theater performances. I'm not sure that I understand the need for over-the-top funding for these facilities. I don't know how many people have toured the police department. When I first came on the finance committee and I was the observer of the police fire, I forget what it's actually called. I toured the police department, and I was horrified at how backward the need, the record keeping, and there is just so much there that needs to be done, and it's on the back burner. There are so many projects in town that are just getting worse and worse, and we can't break the back of the average citizen. There isn't a moderate income level in town and a lower income, as well as the higher income. And when it comes to all of these capital projects, again, the capital plan, the taxpayer is assuming the burden of all of them. And it's not making our town more diverse, and it's catering, to the upper levels. And I have a problem with that. I would like to see the biggest and best, but maybe there's another way to do it than burden the taxpayer. That's all.
Thank you, Andrea. Dick, I think you're up next.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank Kristen and the other people who came today. They've obviously done
a lot of work on this. And I would also like to thank the members of our own committee who have really scrutinized this, like Dean and Parshar and Christine. And I would like to echo each of their comments. But Parshar's comment that if you're going to look at this from, all right, just what does the middle school need? That's one thing. If you start to say, well, this will encourage, town-wide programs, I think that's a different analysis. And then maybe you do need to bring the rec commission in to say, hey, what are your available resources versus your needs? And, maybe I have a rec committee meeting next week and I'll raise that topic. And I think Christine's point is well taken that these projects, there are always overruns, even the best laid plans. You've got construction costs going up, you've got material costs going up, the price of wood, is gone up dramatically because of shortages. So there are definitely some good questions that have been raised tonight, and I think they need to be addressed before you just say, okay, yeah, let's go ahead and let's take the Cadillac option. That's maybe it is a good thing, but I think we need a little more evidence just than the 100 letters we got to the committee saying let's do it because we want to do it, because we think it's a good thing. And I'm saying this as someone who has been in athletics all my life and love them. And I think they're very valuable. But let's take a little closer look and do the right types of analysis. And we certainly have the people on this committee and in this town who are able to do that. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Dick. Kathy, I think you're next.
Well, there's several things that I'd like to say. And first of all, I want to thank Dr. Hunter for leading our education program. I think one of the things that's absolutely wonderful about Concord is our school system and the education. And schools and facilities do attract people, and it does support our valuations and our tax base. So we need to keep that in mind. I am new to the committee this year, and this is the first time I've heard what the high school cost versus what the middle school is costing. And I don't know if you saw my face, but I went, whoa, that the high school was 65 million. So this is a substantial spend. And I do worry about the tax burden and how it affects our long-term citizens, because we don't want to drive people out of their homes. I mean, a typical balance in life is that those of us who have children in the schools or grandchildren in the schools are happy to pay the increases, but you have people who've moved into retirement and they're concerned. So I think we need to look at our costs. I, like Christine, have run projects. I ran projects for major corporations where we did have to open buildings and build out facilities for growth. And there were times that we were sent back to the drawing board. Not that you folks haven't done your work or that you're not professionals, but whether it was, we had to go looking for, somebody different than Steelcase, or, we had to look for, different tile manufacturers, a way to bring down 10% of the cost. So that's just my corporate hat in terms of, budgets. But what really, so that's one piece. I think we can look at what we're spending. The other thing I wanted to add to the conversation, which may be revolutionary, I don't know if you folks have talked about this before, but I liked what Mary said about, are there alternative ways to raise money for these, so many people have said, yes, sports is a good thing. Well, I've worked on hospital boards and library boards, and people go out and raise money for buildings. I mean, have we ever thought of another way to raise money other than to put it all on the individual tax base? I don't know, Mary, if that's ever been done, but this strikes me as the kind of town where you might be able to do it. Did we do something similar for the Beatty Center?
Exactly. Yes.
There are wealthy people who might throw in a couple of $1 million for a bigger gym. So again, that's one of my comments. I love the idea of the school. I think it's a beautiful design. I just worry about cost overruns and continuing to add costs. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Kathy. Brian, you're up next.
Thanks, Mary. I think that much of what I'm about to say basically parrots a lot of what my colleagues on the committee have already stated. I think there are just sort of four key buckets that I think are really important. Number one are the kids. I just want to thank the school committee and everyone that's participated in trying to build the most dynamic, creative school we can for our kids. I think you guys have done a wonderful job of that. As someone that has two kids in the school system, I just want to say thank you for your stewardship around that. With respect to the school in and of itself, I also feel like, as I'm looking at these add-ons, this idea around community is very important. Schools create communities because all our kids are there. We meet at these places, we convene for different reasons, and to have that extra space or to have the requisite space that we need in order to do that, I think that that's very appealing. And I think we need to take that seriously. I do feel like the idea that we're looking at our town resources holistically and thinking about these spaces where we can use them as mixed spaces is really, really important, especially when we have sustainability projects that we want to be thinking about, and how do we make the most of what we have? So I think that there's a lot of appeal. That appeals to me a lot. So I do appreciate the idea that we're thinking about these facilities in that way. The two considerations I think that are really important, I do feel like as I think about this project, the process bothers me. And what bothers me about that is I noticed that we got the investment committee received a lot of positive sort of votes for this project. We got a lot of letters. We didn't get really any negative feedback or any sort of feedback that would suggest their citizens aren't necessarily for that. What I did notice around that is, it was sort of a standard letter that someone sent out and said, if you're for this, go ahead and send this, and then just let's fill up the email box around support. I get that. But I do think that this process always seems like you guys did a masterful job of getting to this point, and now we've just bolted on. We're trying to bolt on something and go way above the budget, which could leave people suspicious about like what's going on and what's going on with this process. So I would encourage you to just be mindful of that. The needs assessment, I think, is really, really important. If we've got good process, surprises like this won't come up. And I think that will provide a lot more consensus and a lot more buy-in across the community. And the costs are important. When I was growing up, both the high school, the middle school, we had one basketball court that we made really, really good use out of. It had, you know, plenty of seating for everyone to show up, parents included. You know, you're not going to get 100% of the kids and 100% of their parents in the same area. So I'm not sure if a double court is that important. So I'm a little torn here, and I would think that a needs assessment would really be helpful here to really make the case for, you know, a double court. I'm someone that really supports athletics. I have 2 girls at home. I think athletics is extremely important to the development of our kids, and you know what those values of sport teach. So when I saw that double court, I immediately was like, this is fantastic. I'd love to see that. I'd love to have that for my kids. But I'm also thinking about the cost, and I think Christine makes a very good point here. You know, the bogey was 80 to 100, and now we're over 100 with this double court. So, and the auditorium. So I would just suggest you go back and really kind of try to be as methodic and as you can, and sort of have a sort of a merits and concerns case, you know, around what the implications are. So the folks that didn't respond, you know, in the positive, in the affirmative, they have the information that they're going to need to make the right choice here. So I'll leave it there, but I'm a little torn. The process kind of bothers me a bit. I'll stop.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you. Lois, you're next.
And I think I'm last, so.
No, you're not. You're not.
Oh, okay.
Talk as long as you want.
You know, coming late in the process, I don't want to repeat what's been said, because there's a lot that's been said already that I agree with. First of all, I certainly agree that the amount of work that's gone into this process and the thought that's gone into it and the quality of the presentations that have been made to the Finance Committee to help us understand how you arrived where you did, and have been tremendous. And I really want to compliment Dr. Hunter and Kristen and Dawn and all the people who've been working on this. I share some of the concerns that other people have expressed. This feels last minute. We've now had a couple of presentations from you guys, and I had a sense that you were focused on the academic, which, you know, you were and you should be, and you made that clear to us. So you were focused on the academic requirements. I never doubted the need for the new building. And I think, you know, we all, if you live in town, you know that, but you made a good convincing case for that as well. So I understood the process. This feels out of step with the rest of the process, and that troubles me. And I think other people have said that too. It doesn't seem the additional materials, additional areas that are being added on now or expanded on just feel like they are being put on the end without the same amount of work and thought having gone into them. So that raises some concerns for me. And I've been getting the emails. I see all the positive comments. I understand there are people who are supporting this. The people right now, the people most focused on this are also the people most likely to be supportive. As this goes out to the larger town, I would hate to see a really important critical project like this end up being endangered because it went too far in terms of the financial ask for the town. Because I think the point's been made by other people, there aren't unlimited resources. There are other needs in town. And at some point, there will be reactions from people in town, not just the retirees who don't have kids in the school, but people who are concerned about the long-term financial health of the town. This is a significant ask from the citizens. And it's 100% of the ask, because for reasons that I'm not questioning, we're not doing this through the state system. So we're paying the whole cost ourselves. So I'm concerned with some of the additions that have been made sort of toward the end of the process. And I'm very concerned that going forward, the town is going to have to start making some very hard choices about other needs because it doesn't have the process in place to consider the things that are coming down the pike. I really echo what Dean said about how we need, and what others have said about how we really do need a better capital planning process so that we can look down the road 5 years, 10 years, and have a sense of what will be coming and make decisions now with information about where we expect to be. I want to see the school built, and I think it'll be a significant addition to the quality of life in the town. But I have some real concerns with some of these, the additions I'm seeing proposed now.
Thank you, Lois. Phil, it's your turn. You want to say something?
Oh, okay. So I really don't have much specific to add to the excellent comments that have already been made. I do think that the middle school building committee has done a great job. And I think we need a new middle school. So I agree with that. But I especially concur with Mary's comments and Dean's comments about the cost and the planning aspect because of the impact on the taxpayer. Again, all these points have been echoed before, including Parashar's excellent analysis of that impact on the taxpayer. But the one specific thing I did want to mention is the bonding and the funding of this. I think it was Dee Ortner who suggested we look at a longer term bond. And I think we should especially consider that, not just a 20-year bond, 25-year bond, but even longer if possible, because this is going to be a 50-year building at the very least. So we should look at the longest possible term bonding to reduce the impact on the taxpayer. And I think maybe that's something Carrie could do. That's all I have.
Is that it? Okay, great. Thank you. I think I've got everybody. John left us. I don't know why. I want to thank everybody for those comments. Really, what a great, made me proud, really. We made some very thoughtful, very well thought out comments. And no one among us could have made that, but as a group, I think we really put something together that I hope the middle school building committee, I know you will take it back and take it to heart. So thank you for asking us. And you can tell we put a lot of thought into it. So I think
Mary, I'm sorry, can I just clarify? I just want to clarify one point, because I agree with you. I think a lot of great comments and a lot of great feedback was given, but I just want to clarify one thing on the process, if I may.
Go ahead.
What I want to be clear is because in the comments I was hearing something about the process and seen kind of negatively, and I can see why it looks that way from where we all sit. But I just want to be clear: the middle school building committee over the past year in doing its work has stayed focused on the budget that was presented at town meeting, and reviewed and endorsed a plan that meets the educational needs and is within that budget. Since then, we have received what I would assess as a significant amount of public comment. The Middle School Building Committee, the MSBC, is a appointed committee by the select board, so it is subject to the open meeting law, and our meetings are recorded, recorded and rebroadcast like your meetings are. And so people have watched the work of the committee, and members of the community have pushed for an expansion of the spaces that we've already talked about. So in receiving that community feedback, the middle school building committee said, we really ought to get some feedback from the finance committee and eventually the select board on this feedback we're receiving from the community. So I don't want to be left that there was a flaw in the process with the building committee. We're getting the same feedback that I think you're now getting. And we just wanted to say, we're hearing this from the community. What do you think of this message we're getting? Because we've already done all this work to stay on budget. And I just want to clarify that, but aside from that, I do think you're right, Mary. You got an excellent, an excellent feedback. We got excellent feedback from the committee tonight. And thank you for that.
Great. Okay, let's move on to the next item on our agenda.
I'd say thank you on behalf of the committee. You guys were great, and this was a really wonderful exercise. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, next thing on our agenda are correspondence.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Were you going to ask members of the public if they wanted to comment now or at the end of the meeting, or are you not opening it up for
No,
members?
actually, Parashar, I look at this meeting as a discussion among the finance committee members. This is not a hearing.
Okay.
It's not a public hearing. There will be public hearings before this comes to town meeting, but this is a conversation among the finance committee.
Okay.
Hey, Mary, before Pat pops off here, with the previous comment, I just feel like I just want to make this just a quick comment.
Go ahead.
The comment about, there was input put, Stephen's comment about input being made, and then you wanted to kind of get some feedback around it. I still feel like the process didn't allow for them to enter this dialogue earlier. And it just I'm trying to understand is there, and maybe this is a future conversation, this isn't something we need to solve tonight, but is there a way for us to get our citizen comments and input feedback earlier in the process, so this doesn't feel like a bolt-on to a well thought out process? Because that's what it feels like. That's what this feels like. That's the perception that I think is that we're trying to communicate. And I just wanted to provide that comment to you.
If I may, Brian, I can see that. I can see why it feels that way. All I can tell you is if you follow the arc of the middle school building committee, this push from the community is new, and it did get plugged into the process at the place it's supposed to get plugged into the process. And that was just a very short time ago. And so it does feel a little bolted on, but it is, I believe, a natural part of the lengthy process the middle school building has been going through. And don't forget, we had a pretty significant pause over a good chunk of 2020. So this feasibility phase isn't rolling out like I think any of us thought it would. But I just want to clarify, I get why it feels that way. In some ways, I think as a committee member, I'm just going to speak for myself. It feels a little like that to me. But having gone through all the meetings and seen the discussion points and the presentations and the opportunities to kind of provide that plug-in, this is the spot it's supposed to be happening.
Oh, thanks for that. I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, just
I would like to mention that there are public forums coming up. There's a public forum on March 31st that the middle school is hosting. So that's another way for the community to have input and to ask questions. This particular meeting tonight was an opportunity for the finance committee to give input to the middle school. This is not a public forum. I want to make that clear to people. And the middle school has done a lot of work and is continuing to do a lot of work to get input from people. And I think March 31st is your next best opportunity. Is that correct? That's right. Isn't that right, Pat?
Yeah, March 31st.
March 31st is the best way for people to give input. But I believe the purpose of tonight was for the finance committee to give input.
Yeah, and there's also a survey that's going to be going out, and that'll also be an opportunity for people to get involved in this process. Respond to the survey and send it to your friends and neighbors.
And Mary, I'll just make a general comment, and we could for later, but I think many folks commented that maybe a capital planning process could have avoided this. Personally speaking, I'm not sure, because I think to the extent that you've got public input and multiple opportunities, you're going to have late entries, my personal opinion. And so I think that's kind of what we saw here. Again, from my perspective, late entry is okay, but let's just come with facts and, before we make a final decision, do the needs assessment, the trade-off analysis, and then you present that to the town. Now people have, good fact base from which to make decisions. That's all.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is that, yes, I think you're always going to have late entries and you're always going to have people reacting to the decisions that they didn't agree with necessarily or didn't prioritize the way they would have prioritized. But I think if the committee or any committee does a good job with the needs assessment, they're better able to address those late entries is what we can, maybe one of the learnings we can take from this. But the committee is doing a great job as far as, going forward, as far as getting, I know they're doing a good job as far as getting input from the community and the survey as well. So you came here and asked for our opinion and
Well, we appreciate it. Thank you.
you got it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
I'll send my husband back to you.
So the next thing on the agenda are correspondences, and it wasn't 100, Dick, but it was several dozen correspondences we got. And as Brian pointed out, many of them were form letters actually, but we did read them. We read them, and I think many of us reflected that we had read them and that it had flavored our thinking about this whole project. So we read them. Observer reports, in the interest of time, I'm wondering, can we just defer observer reports? I mean, we really don't have much to say. Really don't. CFO report, is Carrie still here? Carrie, do you have anything to say besides?
I'm here and nope, I don't have anything to say.
Thank you. And then citizen comments. Are there any comments that don't have to do with the, that would be new to information that we haven't already heard through the letters that we received that people would like to make? Any new information?
Mary, we've got 2 hands up.
Okay. And they are, can you tell me?
Kelly Ryan, Peter Fischelis, and Mark Caruso.
That's 3. You went over budget, Chris. Okay, who is first? Can you tell me who was first? I can't see.
Kelly Ryan.
Okay, Kelly, go ahead.
Sorry there. Thank you, Chairwoman Hartman. I appreciate all of you and your time from the Finance Committee. I did come to this meeting to talk about CMS and the need for an expanded gymnasium space as well as auditorium space. I know that we've moved on from that topic. I guess since we're not talking about that topic, my request is, if we could make a broader statement to the community as to how these meetings happen. I personally was not aware of how these meetings take place and what the process is for speaking up. So I completely understand how the committee may feel as though there are a lot of parents jumping in at the last moment. Although I do have to say that a lot of us did not know that these meetings were taking place during the time. While I'm here, I do understand that the cost analysis is somewhere between 80 and $100 million. It sounds like there's about a $6 million delta there. If you look at that delta and you look at the $5.4-ish million in free cash flow, if that still keeps us on a positive bond rating, it seems to me as though you could potentially reduce that cost by using some of that free cash and keep us in a positive bond rating and lower the tax implications for others. I personally have 3 children in the school system. Not only this is not about basketball, this is about volleyball, about dances, about hosting holiday fairs, about children learning how to speak in public. This is so much more than just basketball and school plays. And I ask the committee to please take that into consideration. This is an issue that is near and dear to many, many people in this community's hearts, many who don't know that it's even coming up. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
So Kelly, for the future reference, typically when committees have meetings, it's discussions among the committee members, and the hearings are really the best opportunities for us to hear. So it's our turn to listen to what you have to say. And the hearings for this year's town meeting will be in May, and there will be, again, a public hearing for when this comes up in special town meeting. So I'm kind of educating you a little bit here.
No,
Chairwoman, I sincerely appreciate that. I think if there's something that we can do to alert the school systems, especially those of us with children in elementary schools that may not be privy to what goes on in small town politics,
Yep.
that would be really helpful. And
Okay.
I think you could get a pretty significant showing from the community there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just address one thing to clear up some factual statements for Kelly? Because I think it's going to be important. Kelly, you mentioned the 5.54 million in free cash that can be used to lower the cost. I think there's 2 points there. Using that money doesn't actually lower the cost of the school itself. You're still shelling out the money. But more importantly, that free cash, the 5.54, is the minimum required, and it's also, I think maybe even a little bit higher than that, for us to be at 5% or more of the free cash reserve. So we're actually at a point now where we actually are at the minimum level in the first place. So it's not money that can be used to help finance this in the first place. I just want to factually make that statement and correct it in case rumors start flying around that there's an extra 5 million to fund any of this.
Thank you, Tina. I appreciate that clarification.
Mrs. Prosher, thank you.
And also, Parashar, I'll add to that we already have 2 million that we allocated last year. So we have allocated 2 million of free cash towards the middle school already to help with the debt service. So when this comes up, but you're absolutely right. Everything you said is correct. Okay.
And 2 million the year before that, Mary,
What?
and 2 million the year before that.
Are you sure?
I believe we've done that twice.
No,
Oh, I think
No. Just
No.
once.
Once.
no, just once.
I wish it was twice. I wish.
Because the reserve only, it has 2 million in it. It would be 4.
Yeah, it's
If that
only
were the
two.
You'd be in a great position.
Let's say it's so. No, it's getting late, people. Okay, who's next, Chris?
Peter Fischelis.
Okay, Peter. Peter, do you have something new to tell us?
Hi, guys.
Welcome
Good to
back.
see all
He's
your
coming back to the
smiling
finance
faces.
committee.
I tried to stay away, but they dragged me back. I just want to clarify a couple of points that I didn't think were, one which needs clarification, one which I didn't think was totally accurate. So if I do the math, $550 a square foot times 6,000 square feet is about 3.3 million. So I don't know where the 6.2 million, and I don't even think it's 4 million for the extra gym space. So I don't think it's going to be as high. And I talked to a few people in construction costs. They said, listen, you should actually use about 2/3 of that because there's a lot of sunk costs that are going into building the building anyway. And I don't want to get into splitting hairs, but it gets to be less of a number. It's still a number, and I'm committed to try to squeeze it out of the current costs, which brings me to my second point. I heard you talk a lot about private funding, and that was something that occurred to me a lot.
Great.
The issue in this particular project is timing. So we could absolutely stop and try to go out and get some private funding. But there's two things. One is there's a couple of other projects going on, the library project. A lot of people have stepped up for that. And so I'm not sure that the timing is right for that. But I also, because of COVID, it seems to me to be a window of a little bit of a depressed cost in construction. We've seen and then this is anecdotal, but we've seen some bids from other schools coming in significantly less, 5 to 10 million less. So speed to me is important too. If we can get this thing out and get it to bid and get it built now before costs go up, we may be able to do these extras at no additional cost. If we stop and take the time to try to raise the money, get pledges, I think that the timing is going to cause the project to slow down. It's just a concern of mine. So just weighing on those 2 points. Thank you.
But Peter, at the last MSBC meeting, it was actually Kristen who gave us the cost because there's a gross up factor for the cost for the extra gym because
yeah, and I've asked her to take another look at it because I'm getting conflicting information. So I don't have a direct answer for you, but I will be addressing that at the next meeting.
Okay. that's one thing I'd say. And then the other thing I'd say is, I think what we're asking is kind of slow down and do a needs assessment. And what I'm hearing you say is hurry up.
Well, if it's going to save us 5 to 10 million, Mary,
But I don't know, will it?
I don't know that either. But I know how fast costs have gone up before, and there seems to be a window now.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Thank you. Always,
Okay.
always good to hear from you. Okay, Chris, are you done, Peter? I'm sorry, do you have?
Yep, all set.
Thank you.
Mark Russo's next, and I'm sorry if you could just identify your name and your address.
Thank you. Who's next? Chris?
Mark Russo.
Okay, great.
Hi, everybody. This is Mark Caruso. I'm at 76 Hawthorne Lane here in Concord. I know it's late. I won't take up much of your time. There's just two things that I wanted to make a point of. First, I think that the process has been very good. We've been working on this with the building committee for about 15 months now. I think that the confusion did come from the pause with COVID, and the design coming out, the final design that was being recommended was a bit of a surprise, which is I think why you're hearing a lot of this public activism right now. The second thing is I do think that there's a lot of education that needs to be done in terms of how the space is used today, how much space we're getting today, tomorrow with the proposed plan versus what we have today. And the bottom line from our perspective is we can't have less space in the new school than we have in the two schools today. And in the plan that is out there right now, we have less gym space and less auditorium space, and that just doesn't make sense. In terms of some of the other things that I've heard tonight, I'll reply via email and won't take up any more time tonight. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mark. Chris, do we have anybody else?
Joanna Boynton.
Joanna?
Yeah, thank you for including me. As you know, I was on the committee, the school committee, I'm sorry, for 6 years, and that has been 2 years ago. We set the budget that you're talking about, 80 to 100 million. And I appreciate that this feels, quote, last minute, or maybe like people are coming to the table late and asking for things, but COVID certainly has turned that on its ear. And likewise, our budget, quote unquote, that we set 2 years ago was something that, was in that context and in that year felt like doable. And 2 years have passed almost since then. And things have changed. As you know, it's been a dramatic change in a lot of things. So I would only ask that, and I appreciate all the work that's gone on ahead of time. All that's gone on before this, but that the voices coming late aren't any less valuable. And they are families, but they're also families like mine that don't have kids in the schools and care deeply about what are the costs for an increased auditorium size or an increased gym size at least to the numbers that we have today. We have for decades existed in two pretty shabby buildings, energy inefficient to the nth degree, and we have this awesome opportunity to fix a lot of that. And I'm only asking that the committee consider what those incremental costs would be to the taxpayer and to the overall building, because who knows? I mean, I work in the building of residential houses, and as many have heard, the lumber costs have gone through the roof. So things do change, and I essentially don't want to be tied to a budget that was sort of, in the context of what other schools were being built for, just because we have that arbitrary stake in the ground, and just would consider, allowing for the families and the people certainly who showed up. I would say, as an aside, we come to these public meetings to have the opportunity to comment. And we certainly, that is why a lot of people, I think you see, have shown up tonight, because they care. And it's not really something out of nowhere or last minute, but I just would appreciate that those of us who are also taxpayers can see the incremental cost to the things that have been put out there and discussed and offered. So thank you.
Next, we have Abby White.
Abby, do you have anything new to add? Because I'm hearing people repeating a lot of what was said in letters. So do you have something new to add?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Go ahead.
I wrote a letter. I won't repeat what's in that letter, but I grew up in the Sanborn building, attended grades 6 through 8 there. I'm a resident of Concord, obviously, at 851 Monument Street. I'm also in residential and land brokerage locally and regionally. So similar to Joanna, it's just remarkable some of the things that have changed because of COVID and just because of costs going up in construction. So I think that does need to be factored into our adjusted budgeting. I also had a question, or just I'm curious what is being planned for the Peabody site, because the land of the Peabody site has also gone up in value. And I just am curious if that's being factored into the overall budget of the middle school project, given that it's being consolidated to one site.
I think that's a great question that we can't answer. I think that's a great question to the middle school building committee. Does anybody else have a better answer?
I think we've asked that question a couple of times, Mary, right?
Yeah,
and the answer is that the property belongs to the town.
Right.
So we've asked them to include the sale of that property to offset the price of the building, but that has not been considered as far as I'm aware, but we have asked. It's a very good question.
It's a very good question. Really is. And I would encourage Abby to bring that up to the middle school building committee when they're struggling with the trade-offs that they face.
Mary?
Yeah.
I can just in 1 minute maybe shed a little light on that if you want, or I can just hold off till we discuss it further.
Actually, Stephen, it's late.
It's late, yeah.
I'm kind of winding down, and I think if Abby, you could write an email or a letter to the middle. I think this would be better brought up at the middle school building committee.
I think it really goes to, it should come to me. And the short answer is we're going to bond the construction project that'll be done before Peabody is ready to be vacated and sold. So the timing of it really doesn't work out for land sale for Peabody to offset debt service for the new middle school. But in terms of the reuse and sale of Peabody, that will be a discussion we go through. But I don't think there's a way to put it into the financials now.
So it should certainly be a part of the 10-year plan, though, if we're talking about looking out to our, just our overall plan for the future. We can certainly project some costs that would be, as far as if we're looking at tax dollars over the 10-year plan, we should also look at what we gain from that, from the additional acreage that won't be used.
Good point. Good point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris?
There's no other hands right now.
Great. Scared. Okay. Okay, people. Thank you very much. This has been a long meeting. It's great working with you all. I will see you when? At the end of April. Okay?
We have to.
We have to do a roll.
We have to shut it down.
I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
What?
Second?
Oh. Second.
Okay. D. Ortner.
Yes.
Mary Hartman, yes. Dean Banfield.
Yes.
Chris Reynolds.
Yes.
Wade Rubenstein.
Of course.
Parasharp.
Yes.
Andrea Zoll.
Yes, I will see you post-surgery.
Oh, wow, Andrea.
Good luck, Andrea.
Good luck.
April 7th.
April 7th.
Good
Okay.
luck.
I'll be
It goes
back.
well.
Ray Andrews.
Yes.
Great. Kathy Cuocolo.
Yes.
Lois Wassoff.
Yes.
Dick Jameson.
Yes.
Phil Swain. I like to hear you.
Sorry, yes.
Great. Brian Taylor.
Yes.
Greg Gorello.
I thought we were just getting started.
Yeah. You missed all the fun.
Could somebody sum it up in 2 minutes? No.
Greg just said yes.
Why did we want to try? We'll just get in trouble.
Yes, please adjourn.
Okay, everybody, have a good sleep.
Good night.
Good night.
Right.